Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 219. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined as always by co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulin, and the Duke of you know. And we're also joined this episode by a friend of the show, Dan Taube. Dan was our quote-unquote employee at the Chicago Comic-Con, and it was really great to get a chance to have this opportunity to talk to Dan. Dan actually, remember I did a shout-out before the Chicago Comic-Con looking for a listener who wanted to help us out by coming by occasionally and manning the table, and we'd buy that person's ticket. Well, Dan was the one who kind of stepped forward and said, hey, I'd be glad to do this, and also Greg. I actually want to give a shout-out to our friend of the show, Greg, who also did this. But Dan, we wanted to record with him at the Comic-Con, and we never had an opportunity to do it. Just things got really busy and hectic, so this is our chance to have Dan on to talk about Brightest Day number 7. We talk cover to cover Brightest Day number 7. We take apart each of the storylines and speculate on where we think they're heading, what we're enjoying, and also what characters we might like to see spin out into series and why. So it's kind of an interesting little chat about that. Also, we have an off-the-cuff discussion about, coming out of the Facebook page, there's a discussion about the growing number of Batman titles and, you know, how things like that affect budgets and how we personally make decisions about our budgets. In that discussion, we also have a casual chat about books like Sweet Tooth, Absolute Planetary, Arkham Asylum Madness, what makes us decide to keep titles, drop titles, how we make those decisions, and what makes us come back to titles. So it's a big kind of casual discussion just about comics in general and budgeting, and something that I think we all face, whether you're buying one comic or you're buying 20 comics, we all face those moments where we have to make those decisions. So it's a pretty meaty episode where we cover a lot of comic topics. There's also a bunch of listener voicemails as well, with some interesting discussions about the DC Universe and the directions it goes in. So a big packed episode of Raging Bullets. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Every week you can hear us on Get Your Geek on Radio, getyourgeekonradio.com, an online radio station committed to making geek chic. Over at dcbservice.com, Brightest Day number 11 and 12. They're regularly $2.99, 40% off, only $1.79 each, which is great savings considering it's a bi-weekly title. It's a great chance to save some money on that. They also have the variant editions. Jim's a big fan of variant covers, and one of the things he likes to do is pre-order some of those variants. They've got both the variant covers for 11 and 12 for $4 each. So if you like collecting those variant covers, definitely make sure to check out dcbservice.com. Those are Ivan Rice covers, which is really very cool. So check those out, dcbservice.com. Over at instocktrades.com, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we started talking about Sweet Tooth. The first 5 issues of Jeff Lemire's Sweet Tooth, Volume 1, Out of the Woods, is regularly $9.99, 37% off. It's only $6.29. In our second segment this episode, there's a big discussion about Sweet Tooth where I have an opportunity to tell you why I'm enjoying that book, and I was trying to tell the other guys why they need to be reading it because they aren't right now. This is a book that I'm really, really enjoying. Jeff Lemire wrote the original hardcover, The Nobody, which I really love. It's Essex County as well, if you've been reading that. I haven't read Essex County yet. That's something I'm going to seek out now because I'm becoming a big fan of his work. You've also seen him in the Brightest Day Adam special and the currently running Adam co-feature that is in Adventure Comics right now. So that's Jeff Lemire, really talented. And like I said, on this episode, I actually explained to you why, but it's 128 pages, only $6.29. It's a great book if you're not picking it up. I'm a big fan of Sweet Tooth, so I wanted to shout that one out personally. That's instocktrades.com, which is your comic book trade paperback, hardcover, collected edition source, and dcbservice.com, which is your pre-order source. And they're just wonderful companies, and I want to thank them for supporting us. Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, Sean, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing. So if we're going over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Nice work, Adam. What are these characters up to?
Brightest Day number 7. Jeff Johns and Peter Tomasi writers, Ivan Rice, Patrick Gleason, Ardian Syaf, Scott Clark, Joe Prado artists, and apologies in advance for any butchery, Vicente Fuentes, David Beatty, Mark Irwin are the inkers. The color work is done by Aspen MLT's Peter Steigerwald with John Starr. Cover by David Finch, Scott Williams, and Steigerwald. Variant cover by Ryan Sook, Fernando Pasarin with Joel Gomez. And colors are by Randy Mayer and Kerry Strachan. Letterer is Rob Clark Jr., assistant editor Rex Ogle, associate editor Adam Schlagman, and editor Eddie Berganza. And actually, I want to comment on the White Lantern Vision spread. Francis Manipool, Mark Bagley, Mike Mayhew, Aaron Lopresti, Ivan Rice, Joe Prado, Rob Hunter, and Matt Ryan did the work on that. A lot of people worked on this issue. I want to introduce Dan Taube. Dan, you were, along with Greg, our Chicago Comic-Con employees, and we wanted to record with you and more friends of the shows at the con, and as everything would things start getting busy, we didn't have the chance to do that, so we wanted to get you on the show to do a full segment like this, and I'm really glad that, first of all, great to talk to you again, and second of all, glad that we finally got you on Raging Bullets, so welcome to the show.
Thanks. Yeah, it's great to be here, and I certainly enjoyed being your backup for the show. So,
and I really appreciate that. Actually, the employee thing, I actually have quotes on it when I was saying it because it was really nice. You were a friend, and you came out to help us out there, and really just at a time where we needed somebody just to give us a quick little break here and there. And thank you so much for doing that.
Come on, say it. You want to say it? When we needed the call for backup, he was there.
No, I didn't want to say that.
Yeah, you did. I could see it in your eye. You had this twinkle in your eye saying, oh, I got to say it.
Well, I know how much you guys appreciate backup, so, I was happy to do my part.
I think it's important that we kick off this discussion about the art in general. This is a well-put-together experience. There are a number of different art teams working on this to make a combined production, and it flows really smoothly. At least I think it does. I never hit a page where I was like, wow, the art looks different here. I never really had that experience throughout it. But this shows just careful planning to me. But those are just my thoughts. What do you guys think? Dan, what did you feel about the art experiences? Was there anything that was jarring to you where you're kind of like, wow, okay, I'm dealing with a different art team here or a different artist working on this particular page or segment?
It's very funny because I feel really stupid right now because, the art definitely had quite an impact on me. I didn't notice in that title page everybody that worked on that White Lantern Vision spread, and it actually makes, it makes a lot of sense. But I think one of the things that really hit me about the art is I've heard Jeff Johns talk about he writes very emotionally and all that. And when you get to those pages where Deadman turns and the art, it's got such an emotional punch to it.
Jim, what about you?
Oh yeah, agree big time. Like there was like that diner, the opening diner sequence, just the way they were drawn. Dawn was drawn and Deadman was. There was a lot of stuff. I was like, oh wow, I liked it, and it was just that's right out the gun. Just sitting there going, this is just a great. Just it had this friendly, inviting, warm feeling to it, and they were just sitting around eating burgers and just jaw jacking, and I was like, wow, this is cool.
Definitely made me hungry.
Yeah.
I love that there was a storytelling reason for this that was really deep when you think about it. It was Big Belly Burger where they were at. Boston Brand isn't used to eating. He's been disembodied for so long that it's interesting to see him reconnect with life. It seemed really clear in the earlier issues that he was not only uncomfortable with returning to life, but almost seemed to like he was against the idea. But the ring seemed focused on reconnecting him with the joys of being alive, the simple pleasures we take for granted, in this case, a good burger. This guy's truly a fish out of water. Now, guys, are there things you want to see Deadman reconnect with? The top of my list is a good sneeze. Maybe tease him with a build-up to a sneeze that never pays off, but eventually get him hit with like a good 2 or 3 in a row monster that requires a double ply Kleenex. Sure, it sounds gross, but you know how he'll feel relieved afterwards. What about you guys?
Well, I think he needs a good scratch. Every guy, sometimes you just need a good scratch. You just need to kind of reach in, dig down deep, and kind of just that Al Bundy, let your inner Bundy out.
I am so regretting even bringing this up.
I meant scratch of the nose.
That's fine.
I don't know if we're getting set up for this or not, but, I kind of would like to see him get together with Dove. So, that's an aspect of life that he could reconnect to, certainly.
Yeah, to see him actually have an emotional connection. Because I think that's part of his problem. He feels completely disconnected from life in general. And actually, it is, all kidding aside, I really love the use of Dawn here, showing her gentler side, that she was genuinely concerned about bringing up some peace to his current condition. Whether or not he gets roped, because I do see more Hawk and Dove being teased at having a romantic relationship. But it was funny when, Dan, you brought that up. That is something that I would find interesting as well, because I do love the way she seems to be interested in bringing peace to everybody. It wasn't just bringing the peace that she brings to war, the war icon of Hawk, but also, Jimmy, you're going to start taking. Go ahead.
Oh my God! I take just is the mentioning of someone just pursuing a relationship or emotional connection with Dove just has me laughing at how Hawk will deal with it. Talk about overprotective partner / father figure. Add to it, he's a little bit psychotic. Oh God, that would be absolutely hysterical moments of what are your intentions with her, and remember, I can rip your arms off, kind of deal.
Yet, do you feel there is a tension between the two? There is something between the two of them more or not? I keep wondering if Dawn's denial is a bit too much, or if Hawk's denial maybe is. Is he protecting her because he has stronger feelings or not? I don't know. I'm very curious to see what is driving that.
I don't get that feeling. What's interesting to me is just throughout the book, it just seems like every story is being told in terms of these pairs, and that there's something that each character is supposed to learn from one other person. I mean, the Hawk and Dove thing is almost more a sense of like what he would get out of that would be, it would almost seem like having to feel what it might be like to protect somebody that he could lose more than anything else. So that whole kind of paternal or big brother thing that he's going to have to actually feel as opposed to just fight seems to be kind of his thing.
What I thought was interesting, though, Deadman brings it up. What does Hawk do for Dove in return? And I thought that, he comes up and says that he protects her. And we do see from the later vision that is obviously going to be, or needs to be, an element there. But I can't help but wonder if there isn't a deeper meaning to that question. Isn't there, is there something more deep-rooted there that Dove is going to notice that she gets from him? I don't know. And I could be, grasping at that and speculating too. That's interesting. It was funny. I didn't look at her and Deadman hooking up until you brought it up, Dan. And I was like sitting there, I'm like, oh, that would be kind of interesting to explore too. I guess the reason why I've been connecting her and Hawk together so much is because outside of Brightest Day, they are a part of Birds of Prey together.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm very curious to see, though, Deadman. That was an interesting thing that I never considered. The fact of him having a love connection, some kind of relationship, whether or not it's somebody that he falls in love with, but a human connection, because he does not have that right now at all.
Yeah,
I think it's easy for him to say something like protect because it's very military. It's very, kind of alpha male. Mm-hmm. But, kind of the key to protecting is you have to actually fear losing, and just in terms of the emotions that get brought up with all these different characters, that would be a challenge, I think.
The balance of war and peace, it's kind of like a difficult, concept to actually really identify and go along with. You look at the military and you're like, is their purpose, the promotion, the defense of peace or the promotion of war? Both have two very definite, different outcomes, but if you look at the actions you need to take to get to those goals, they're very similar. There is still that military conflict. There is still that violence, that aggression, but in the end, are you looking to make things a better place, or are you looking to conquer? It's, look at, what we're doing over in the Middle East. Some people say, oh, it was just trying to conquer those people. No, they're trying to free them. It's, what is it, can each side say, no, it's this? And I look at Hawk and I see that conflict in him. And I see Dove's purpose is to give him that peace within the violence. There is that rage, there is that striking out, there is that offensive alpha male in him, but there is the good goal, the good process, the end game is a positive thing. And I think she's, giving him that, and that's the emotional responses that he's afraid to say. He's afraid to admit. He just wants to be the guy that punches people, because that's easier than saying, I'm the guy who punches people, but do I have to punch this person? Can I solve this a different way? It's kind of, that's the relationship I see between them, not a physical, not a remote romantic.
But except when somebody...
No, it's yin, I think it's yin and yang, because I think you're a more effective avatar of war if you understand peace and vice versa. It's a balance,
I'm going to disagree to a certain extent, just in the sense that when you find that person, because her goal here is to help him to control his anger and find balance in his life, which is something that she kind of addresses there. And what you guys are saying makes sense to me, so I'm not disagreeing in that sense, but just to present another possibility here, one of the things that I think is interesting is, how is he going to feel when he starts to see that being with her, being in this relationship, helps add a purpose to his life, controlling that anger and directing it? The one good thing, when you were talking about war before, as an avatar of war, he has a possibility to be totally chaotic, just cause war everywhere. Like you said, the punching is just easier. Or to have a real defined purpose where you're making a difference with that war. War without reason or war with reason. War with reason and with purpose accomplishes something. Where you can kind of look at it and say, is war necessary? Sometimes, yeah, it is. And that's kind of, it's a deep issue to deal with. I'm going to be curious to see how much chance Gail Simone's going to have. Who knows where these people that have returned, are they all going to live through this? Are they all going to gain that true life? Because at the end there was that hint that they're not really 100% back yet, which explains a lot of the difficulties that all these guys are having in this, that we've seen all the way through it. And we've seen, like, with Hawk and Birds of Prey right now, we're seeing him having issues because of this. Everybody has a little quirk or problem since they've come back, which adds a little emphasis to the exclamation point at the end. I know I'm jumping ahead with that, but it's worth it in this point here. I'm curious to how Hawk is going to grow as he starts to realize that this relationship with Dawn, and it could be, that he respects her more, they become closer friends, it's more of a brother-sister relationship, or in situations like that, you start to look at the female differently and start to see the romantic, or is she going to see the romantic ties, and because he has such trouble controlling the chaos he brings, ultimately you're going to see that there's no possibility of this ever being a relationship that could go anywhere because he can't control himself.
Wow, wow.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's an interesting. I'm totally captivated in this relationship right now. And the funny part is, as you guys were talking about the possibilities you were seeing, I was like, you know what? I could totally follow that. Like when he threw out Dead Man as a possibility of hooking up with Dawn, I'm like, okay, I can see that. Pretty Girl, he's finding that she's very similar to what she does for Hawk, she's doing it for him. It's funny how I connected with her role. She's really doing the same thing for both of them. And that's what I wonder if that's the reason why Hawk is so frustrated with Dead Man. I guess I saw more jealousy there from him, in the sense that they seem to have this really nice relationship going on right now, and he seems to be reacting very angrily to Dead Man for what I feel is like very little cause.
See, I didn't get jealousy. I just got the fact that he seems to have a really difficult time trusting people, and is suspicious of everyone unless he's figured them out, unless he knows them, unless he's had some experience with them.
It seems to be, though, that it's more emphasized when it's somebody who's interacting with Dawn versus it's somebody that's interacting with him.
It's funny you said. I'm the same with Dan there, where I didn't see it as jealousy. I saw it just as Hawk being Hawk. But you know what? The more you mention it, the more I'm thinking. I look, I'm like, yeah, that's actually, you know what? I like that concept of a jealousy, that he's seeing this moment these two are having, and he's not too happy about it.
I 100% agree with Dan, though, that it is a distrust. And I'm totally seeing what Dan's seeing there. But I've noticed...
It could even be a jealousy that he's unconscious of.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. If it's a jealousy, he doesn't realize it. It's going to be one of those things that he eventually... If this comes about, it's going to be one of those things where he's going to have that moment like, oh my God, I actually have feelings for her. This isn't right. This is going to be an issue. This is going to be a problem kind of deal. Because when you work so close with somebody, and then you realize, I'm having feelings for this person. this is not a good situation. I can see him completely going through that kind of deal. And I wasn't even thinking that kind of stuff before. And now I'm like, yeah, I could see it.
And what Dan just said is 100% what I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's outwardly that he's aware of it. I'm saying that I've noticed, and I maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I want to go back through and I'll look again. But it seems like every time he's behaving like this, it's when somebody's interacting with Dove versus when they're interacting with him. He seems to be a lot more reserved in those situations. I mean, obviously when he's in Hawk mode and he's out there fighting bad guys, he's all over the place. But I'm talking about when he's in civilian mode and he's just hanging out, he's not this outwardly aggressive on this level, at least to the level that he takes it whenever somebody's interacting with Dawn and he seems to get frustrated. Because he was clearly left out of that conversation. He wasn't a part of it. He was confiding, Deadman was confiding in Dawn. Dawn was confiding in him. And at that point in time, Deadman was really asking the question, what does Hawk bring to your relationship? And he walked in on that.
Yeah.
And you saw his reaction to that. So, I mean, that's really a moment where, he's taking that personally.
Maybe Deadman's trying to muscle him out of the game, trying to move in on his spot kind of deal.
I don't think that's the case, though. I don't think Deadman's at a place where...
Well, he's not trying to, but that's what Hawk maybe sees.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
He does have other reasons to be resentful and to dislike the Deadman right now, because he's resentful of the fact that he wasn't able to bring his brother back,
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's definitely an issue there. But I do think that I've noticed in the specific relationship with Dove, there's some, and let me say this. I don't think it would matter if it was Deadman sitting there or somebody else sitting there. I think he would react similarly during that situation. You're right, though, that there are other motivations as far as why, and that's an area where I could be off base on this, is he just angry at Deadman because of the brother? I think there's more to it than that. I do think that that's definitely a major factor in there. I mean, imagine that somebody's got a ring that can bring things back to life. He brought that bird back to life. That's on the table. They're aware that happened. So why can't he do it with anybody else? They've already covered this. They tried the attempt, and basically he was told that he shouldn't be doing this. Yeah. Why are you doing this? That's an interesting twist. What is the goal what is the actual purpose of that ring?
Yeah, what's the entity that's there? What's their end game? What do they want?
Because there's definitely each of the other entities have a purpose. They're trying to do something. You can see the MO, especially I think the Hope lantern is probably the easiest one to tell what their purpose is. They try to bring hope, in situations that need hope. And that's the purpose of that entity. It's just kind of, and it has symbiotic relationships then with the compassion one, for example, because of it. What is the overall purpose of the white light? Life. But what does that mean? And I don't think that's something that we are totally 100% clear on yet. I think we're just being fed little tastes. I think we're seeing it with Deadman, though, to a certain extent. Like the embracing life, appreciating life, knowing that this is a gift and things like that. He doesn't get that yet. I think the burger was kind of an interesting little twist. I loved how this little 2-page segment, though, meant so much to me. That him eating the burger and just kind of connecting with that. And Dan getting the connection, I never saw anything like that, but getting that, I would love to see him have a relationship out of this. And the second he said that, I'd love to see him, whether it's a romantic relationship or somebody who he has a friend or, some kind of connection to this plane, because he doesn't have that right now. Like, Dove and Hawk right now are acquaintances. Dove is just an acquaintance at this moment. There isn't a romantic relationship there yet. There could be, even if it's not reciprocated. He isn't in that place right now where he connects with anybody on that level.
This is going to... I'm actually being serious when I make this comment, but I know it's going to sound like I'm joking. I'd actually like to see him get a hug. Just really, you think about just, when you ever have like a really just good hug where you're just sitting there and you're just like, nothing sexual, nothing like that. It's just that closeness and that contact with another human being and just that warm friendship kind of dealing, he's been dead. He's been non-corporeal, for how long? It would probably feel so weird to him just to have that. And I'm being 100% serious here.
Do you want that before or after the scratch and the sneeze?
Well, after he washes his hands after the scratch and sneeze, he should get a nice.
You're not supposed to sneeze in your hands. You got to sneeze in your arm.
I'm old school, man. I go in the hand.
Well, and he probably would be too.
He's old school. Come on.
Yeah.
Hell, he may not.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a traumatized character. I think it goes back to even before he became Dead Man. What little history we're getting, it seems like he wasn't really engaging with life then.
Yeah, because she asked him, like, what do you like to do? He's like, I don't know. And, well, what about acrobatics? Oh, that was just a paycheck kind of deal. So he needs to get a life.
But here's the funny part. Was that really just a paycheck to him? And it may turn out that that's the case. Or is he so far removed from life that he doesn't remember what he liked? Because he didn't remember that he liked cheeseburgers until he was in that situation. So I guess my question is he really being truthful with himself, or does he not know? I think he genuinely doesn't know. I don't think his answers are genuine because he doesn't remember. He doesn't connect with life anymore. Remember, he's been Dead Man for a long time.
Yeah.
So for him, connecting with life and all that, he doesn't remember what any of that was like. Doesn't know what that feels like anymore. I mean, we've been joking around about little things like scratches and sneezes and hugs, and you weren't joking with the hugs.
Sure.
But I mean, there's some truth to all of those things.
Yeah.
Just in the sense that in all of those situations, you feel something. There's a connection to something. He doesn't connect with any of that. You talk about like a Bruce Wayne where Bruce Wayne, some of his combat techniques come from physical as well as emotional memory and things like that to connect with those. This guy doesn't have any of that because he was disembodied. So, I mean, it's an interesting... He had to inhabit another body in order to have any kind of tentative connection with the world, and even that was... It was more like he was violating somebody's body than actually reconnecting with the world and being a part of it again. So it's interesting to see this guy's journey. I find him... It's funny, and one of the questions, and I'll probably jump to it now, one of the questions I have for you guys, is there a particular thread you're enjoying the most in Brightest Day? A particular set of characters you're enjoying the most? Or is it the whole experience? And Dan, I'll kind of go to you first. Is there somebody in particular you're enjoying the most?
It's a difficult question to answer. What I wanted to tell you guys is that what I did recently, and it said a lot to me about the strength of the entire series, was I sat down and I read 0 through 7, and it gave me such a better picture of the whole journey. I would say that if there's one character that I'm really enjoying following, because they're all brand new to me. I mean, I don't know that much about any of them, and I'm finding them all fascinating, would be Dead Man. But what I'm enjoying story-wise, in terms of just the storytelling, is how high they are stacking the deck with Aquaman and Mira.
Yeah.
Because those are characters that I don't really have any experience with. And I love the way that issue after issue after issue, the stakes just keep getting higher and higher and higher and higher, and you just feel like nothing good can come from this. And that's part of what makes it exciting, I think.
Yeah, I think right out the box, it was Aquaman and the Hawks. Really, I was like, oh man, I'm getting it. But as we get into Jason and Ronnie, they're really starting to rise up the thing, up the listing, and as well as John, Martian Manhunter. I'm really starting to go, ooh, because he was a character that every time I read, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting guy. This is kind of neat. I'm wondering where this is going, and seeing his kind of deal going on, with this issue, he's starting to. His story is now starting to rise up again for me, and I'm like, oh, okay, so that's, it is hard to pick just one, and I really can't just say one, but it's these characters, and then as the story starts flaming up, I'm going to start enjoying it, and just like, this conversation we're having right now is making me more interested in Boston Brand, because I'm starting to think and look differently what kind of stuff he's going to go through, so I know the next couple issues, he's going to start rising up in my stock, and start making, ooh, that's kind of neat.
It's funny. It'd be very easy for me and to say the Hawks because of my love for them, and now finally having them in a regular series. I'm getting them bi-weekly in this series, so I'm loving that. And I walked in with high expectations for that, though. I'm like, Jeff Johns and now Peter Tomasi, writing these characters. I'm like, okay, it's going to be a home run. And that delivered exactly like I was expected. So I'm not taking anything away from that. I think what surprised me the most, though, is how much I'm enjoying Deadman. It's why I asked that question where I did, because we were having this deep, in-depth discussion about this character. I am adoring this character. Aquaman and Mira, I agree with you, was my first initial connection and remains it in this. Reading Aquaman and Mira in this, I can't see how this wouldn't work as a series. Because as I'm reading that, I'm like, I want to follow them more. I'm finding them incredibly engaging and exciting. They should be a series. And that's pretty true in the whole experience. I love everybody that's presented in this, when you were shouting off John. But I would say my number one is definitely Deadman. Close second is Aquaman and Mira, and third would be the Hawks, which not taking anything away from the Hawks, but Deadman has been such a surprise in all this one, such a pleasant surprise in following his journey. And I think we're supposed to be following him, though. I mean, I think that's a storytelling design, that he's our eyes into what's going on to everybody else. So I think we're supposed to be going on the journey with him and kind of watching everybody else like through his eyes, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I'm really digging.
He feels like the audience connector. He feels like the character that the audience is supposed to connect with the most.
And I feel that's been a home run. I mean, I really like the character. I read a lot of him in the 70s in appearances with Batman. I shouldn't say a lot of him, but I mean, that's more of what my exposure to him was, as this guy that kind of possessed people and occasionally teamed up with Batman. That was my exposure to him, but I never, really had a deep-rooted connection to Deadman. Now I find that I really love I watched the guy eat a cheeseburger, and I can't stop talking about it. So, I mean, that says a lot about a character when you can take something so simplistic, yet it has such a deep-rooted meaning because of who this character is and where he's come from. And that only works if the writers have done their homework in the previous 6 issues in connecting us with that character. And they did it. I mean, he matters. The ring seems to be guiding each to a place where they can fight the battle to prevent the destruction of the light and life itself, or some element of life itself seems to be what's going on here. What would you guys miss the most if you were disembodied? Because it was funny, I was thinking about this when I was thinking about Deadman. That was one of my... I'm like, the cheeseburger thing really brought to life what it means to be this guy. What do you guys think you would miss the most?
I'd have to go with probably the food aspect of life. I would miss regular interaction with people, but I've had moments where I've gone multiple days and weeks without really even having any communication with another human being. So I think...
Not since you've been doing this podcast.
Well, yeah. But in the past, I've lived like a hermit, lived in a tomb, kind of my apartment building, not coming out only when I need to get some food. But it's I've always had moments. It's like I've always had food that I've enjoyed, and whether it's good pizza, pizza and a beer, a nice burger, and just various kind of that type of stuff.
I think that the thing that would be most difficult for me would just be the sense of touch, of just being tactile. I think the thing that would be so difficult about that is you would feel like you had no impact on anything, and just in general, missing that sense of touch, I think, is probably what I would miss the most.
I'd put down my wife for sure, because obviously she'd kill me if I didn't say that, which is honestly the truth. But I think we've all kind of agreed with the sense of touch, with things that you said. Interaction with people and stuff like that certainly has its place. But as far as on the personal end, what personal things would I miss? I love to read. Obviously, by the fact that we do this show, that's a very important part of my life. It's my source of comfort, when I'm having a stressful day. I read every day on some level, whether it's reading a comic book or a chapter in a novel or something like that. It's a very important part of my life. If you're disembodied, you can't turn pages. Deadman could possess somebody and do that, but you've got to be in a position where the person's by something that you want to read, and you're able to possess them for long enough that you could actually read it. I would be giving that up. That sense of reading and the freedom of being able to read what I want when I want where I want to. Little things like that. And it seems like a simplistic thing, but that's something that I'm like, wow, this is a daily ritual. It's a part of my life that it never bores me. I always find something entertaining in. It's something where I connect with other people because of it. Internally, it does things to me where it makes me think and view the world in different ways. I mean, look at the discussions we've just had here, going over the first few pages of this book off of reading. It's something that it does for me, whether it's an intrinsic or an external thing. And it's something like, wow, I could not do that. You wouldn't be able, how do you turn pages? You don't. So that's gone. So it was funny how when I saw that segment with him with the little bitty cheeseburger thing, it seems so like simplistic and a throwaway, but it's very deep when you think about what would you miss. He had a love for cheeseburgers, doesn't even remember that now. Now take all of these things that we just discussed here and imagine getting to the point where you've forgotten you enjoyed them. That's where he's at. And that's the point I was trying to make here with this, and that's why I even asked the question. He's at the point where everything we threw out here and a whole bunch of other stuff that we didn't have a chance to mention here because we could go on talking about this. He has forgotten what it was like to enjoy any of those things. That's what he's trying to reconnect with. That's deep. That's cool. I love that. There was actually a point to this whole tangent. I wasn't joking around. That's what this guy's forgotten here. I'm so fascinated by this guy. When he goes to the point where he goes over to the lantern that Hawk couldn't lift up, and Deadman picks it up and asks the question that we've all been wanting to know. Why did you bring us back? You see Jackson there, the new Aqualad, or who's going to be the new Aqualad. His arm's lighting up with the white light. And I was thinking of that teaser image. Have you guys both seen that? I know you did, Jim, because we talked about the show. He's got that white sword in that bit. I have to wonder, what does the white arm mean? Is that sword going to come out of this? Is he able to make constructs from it? I'm just curious, like that white arm to me doesn't seem to be a throwaway because he's the only one that has that happening to him in the sequences. You'll see that the white light's just running up his one arm. It's his right arm. And I'm like, whoa, what is going on here? What does this mean? And where are we going to go from here? So it was a funny how just that little tiny moment means something. This is a character who we've seen him briefly. We know he can't swim.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to see what his whole role is, where he's going to go, and why. He's obviously one of the things that Aquaman has to do is find him before the others do. I'm curious to see why he's so important.
It's the trigger. I took it as the trigger. That white light was just kind of like erupting and kind of like evoking what he is inside him. So it's like his internal energy and his powers are like kind of starting to manifest. Dan,
how did you take it? Or what were you thinking?
Well, I mean, I got some information from some of the panels that came out of San Diego that certainly gave a lot of meaning to find him first. I mean, they had revealed that Black Manta's his father,
right?
And so find him first. Again, it's that level of raising the stakes, of making things as difficult as possible for Aquaman. So got that panel and you see it, find him first. There's yet another struggle, another challenge for him, and that's part of what makes it interesting to me.
I wonder who his mother is.
Yeah.
Because I knew that Black Manta was going to be his father. When they say find him before they do, it wasn't find him before he does, which would imply exclusively. And I totally agree with you that the implication there is, I think Black Manta is a part of they. But I can't help but wonder if Mira's people aren't also a part of they.
Well, Mira said that like last issue, I think that her people had known, Black Manta before all this. So I'm thinking there's a definite connection that her people have with Black Manta, and her people are hunting down, are going to be hunting down the new Aqualad, and he's probably going to be some type of key maybe to Aquaman living. He had the problem in the past with the summoning of the dead fish. Maybe the cleansing thing, the final cleansing of Aquaman will come from Aqualad.
I think in order for, at least the way I'm reading this, in order for all of them to be alive again, 100% alive, at least how I'm reading this, and I don't know if you guys are reading this, so please, this is speculation, this isn't me saying this is gospel. this entity is giving each of them tasks, telling them things that they need to do. But the one big surrounding task that seems to be a part of all of this is finding the successor for this entity. The entity seems to be at the end of its tether, the end of its
life
or whatever,
existence.
and needs to pass it on to the successor, the next being to take over for this person. I feel when that's done, that will cement either some or all of them to being back permanently. I'm assuming, I guess assuming that all of these things need to fall into place on some level, that would then cement all of them to being back. I guess. I don't know that all of them... Do you guys think that all of them have to remain when this is done? Or do you think it's possible that some of them won't succeed and we will see some of them not come back? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a definite possibility, and I was kind of thinking, are we going to get everybody? Or, especially as you go through, definitely with each one of them, they have this task and to get the full life back, because each one of them has a little bit of connection to the darkness. Aquaman was summoning only dead fish. The Hawks, anytime they kissed or touched, they both had that dark matter coming out. We're seeing the Black Lantern, Firestorm inside Ronnie and Jason when they're mixed. So there's always just that
Martian Manhunter has issues. Hawk, we're seeing in Birds of Prey right now is having issues.
So each one of them has a little bit of a kind of a tweak, to them that's got to, if you want to get rid of that tweak, if you want a full, complete life, if you want to be you again, you have to do this task. Right. And if they fail, I'm thinking they won't have the connection. When everything is said and done, they'll be gone. And I don't want to see it happen to any of them, but I definitely think some of them have a bullseye on their chest. There's some of them who has a definite possibility of going away, and it's definitely could happen. I can't see them doing it. I think they brought him back for a reason. They're going to keep him around, but that's one of the cool parts of the mystery behind this. Are they back for good?
Well, I would hate to see any of them go, but at the same time, when you look at those panels of when they get the message of this is what you're supposed to do, the thing that goes through my mind is this stuff that's definitely going to happen, or is it something that could happen? Because if you look at the specific images, then it's very, very possible that it's the sacrifice, so to speak, would be Dove.
Well, except though, if you take a look at that, let's talk about that one specifically. We have Digger
for that to be the case, but
Digger Harkness was tasked with throwing the boomerang at Dove. Hawk is tasked with catching the boomerang. So my question is, why is Digger, what is it about that? Because we know that Digger's boomerangs that he's throwing right now are coming from the same energy that comes from the Black Lantern.
Yeah, it's like the dark matter energy kind of boomerangs now. He's not throwing his regular, traditional, man-made stuff.
He's able to generate them.
Yeah.
So, and Hawk, what happened? What does it mean if he catches it?
Here's the one thing I was thinking. What if the only way he can catch the boomerang is in his chest, and he has to make the sacrifice to save Dove's life?
I don't know. I don't.
Yeah, because he was the guy I was thinking has a chance of dying. He'll do the jump in front, take it in the chest, and go down. And
especially seeing what's been in Birds, we're seeing that he's vulnerable to stuff like that. So I don't know. See, I guess to me, I was wondering, what does catch the boomerang mean? Does it mean catch it with your hand or catching it with your body or what? You were thinking the same way. So, there's a lot of levels you can take that as. And what happens if somebody fails? I don't know. It's an interesting... there's no real definite answer to any of these questions I'm asking. They're the questions I'm asking as I'm reading. But that to me is fascinating. They've laid out here what we've all wanted to know all along. But now that they've laid this out, there's more questions... that have spawned from this than there probably were for the first 6 issues in a series that has been filled with mystery. And I love that. It's not a criticism. It's actually just the opposite. I think it's a strength of this, is that I want to come back each week to get the little tidbits. And I am definitely a fish on a hook with this series because of this.
It seems to be going deeper each issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about with John, because the task he was challenged with was burn down the forest, burn it all down, which is, it's got to be the Star City forest. But is he going to burn down, because that's where that's Green Arrow's, deal going on now. That's where he is. So are we going to see a change in the Green Arrow story arc, or does he not burn down the forest, or is it only burn down the one tree, or is there something completely else out there?
Well, and see, I think it is that forest too. I'm gonna, especially because of the teaser image, because that seemed to be where John was in the teaser. I guess the question is, how is Ollie going to feel about that? Does he have to burn down that forest to bring back Ollie? From what we saw in Green, I don't know. Or what will that? Because if that forest is if that's a tree of life, and that forest is what it is, what happens if he burns that down? What will it release? I'm assuming there's a purpose. Burning it down for what reason? What is going to happen if you burn it down? Will it release an energy? Or will it prevent something from happening? I don't know. You don't burn down. If you're an energy, you're not going to tell him to burn down a forest for no reason. What is going to happen because he does that? That's fascinating to me.
Maybe it'll reveal something.
Yeah, very much.
Maybe there's something underneath the woods that the tree's covering up, and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't see that. I should have known that.
I'm banking on an energy release. I'm banking on that is going to release some form. I don't know. I might be wrong there. Maybe that'll be an element to cause part of this cleansing you were talking about. I don't know. Was I the only one that thought there was a real possibility Miss Martian was a goner?
No, you weren't the only one. I was thinking that, and I was actually really glad when after he got his vision as to what he's supposed to do, she was healed 100%. And
I was thrilled.
That came purely from him. He healed her with when the white light came into him. Because we saw the same thing with Arthur when he got the white light in him.
Yeah.
All those dead fish came back. So I was like, wow, that's okay. We gotta, and it's gotta be just the white light coming in, doing the healing process.
Right. Dan, what about you? Did you think, or there's not a right or wrong answer to this one either. That was just, I was really, when I saw her laying there, I thought there was a good possibility. I saw the possibility she was saved too, but I really was worried about this character because I happen to like the character. Did you feel the character was going to survive, or?
I feel like all bets are off for pretty much anybody, so I really didn't know.
Yeah, especially, she's a cool character, but she is a character that recently hasn't been, like a A-list, first draw kind of player where, we got to have Miss Martian in this issue. She's a neat character, and they use her strengths, but she's not like Superman. She's not like
You're
Batman.
not caught up on your reading, are you?
Not completely, no. But
are you caught up on Justice League and Teen Titans and stuff like that?
I know what you're talking about in Justice League and in not the Titans.
She's like all over. She's all over the place right now.
Yeah, I know.
But yet, going back to what you're saying, in spite of all that, I still thought that there was a good possibility. Because placement-wise, if this takes place after all that, for example, who knows timeline-wise when this runs along with all of that? Because obviously, it's not at the same time as all that. Because she can't be lying in John's arms when all that's going on. So if this took place after that, then what does that mean? So I don't know. I agree that there was a target. There was a possibility she was done for.
Yeah, because I kind of actually took place after the Justice League stuff, because remember when John was trying to find her, he was talking to Connor at the Titan Tower. He's like, hey, she's kind of unwinding a little bit. She's had a lot of strain. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, she had the strain in those previous issues, and this was after all of that happened, and she needed to just kind of calm down a little bit, get a little focused in the Outback.
So this actually, timeline-wise, then, would take place probably before the upcoming J.T. Krull, Nicholas Scott run on Teen Titans.
Right.
Okay.
That's how I'm kind of seeing. That's why I was thinking.
That makes perfect sense to me.
A good bullseye on her chest.
Mm-hmm. That actually makes perfect sense to me. That would be. I mean, we'll obviously see in those issues, but that would make sense, and I totally agree with you. Firestorm. I am confused about Firestorm. The professor talks about the third and final, and not in a bad way. I'm enjoying this, but the professor talks about the third and final stage. And I'm wondering, has the Black Lantern Firestorm possessed that? Because the Black Lantern Firestorm is what's in there. Is that what? Are we all in agreement that that's what we're seeing there, holding that? Because it was holding the Black Lantern there, and that's what. Is that what's inside them still? That's somehow still in there and alive?
I was thinking. Well, I was definitely most of the time thinking that, but then I started thinking about maybe what's inside them is the dark evil entity that's trying to kill the white light entity. Because there's a whole pressing thing about finding the next chosen one before, and maybe what's in them is the before. Maybe they're in actually a prison holding.
You're misunderstanding me. If what we know about the Black Lanterns were that they were all like, it was kind of they were all connected to that central source. So when I'm saying Black Lantern Firestorm, I mean that there's still an element of what was that Black Lantern darkness inside there. I'm not saying like that's we're saying the same thing. I'm not trying to dispute you. I'm agreeing with you. But when I'm saying that, I mean, that's still... Because we see when in that image where she's saying, you've got to stop... Or I keep saying she. I guess I've determined that the White Lantern's a she, at least for right now. When we see the White Lantern say that you've got to stop this entity... We see that it's I'm guessing that's the Black Lantern Firestorm because it's holding the Black Lantern.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on there. The other thing I was thinking about with the third stage, maybe the third stage is a separate problem and the professor doesn't fully realize what's going on with them. Because we do see when the two of them are merged that now their flames actually burn things, which is a new condition. It's part of them connecting to going to this third stage. Professor Stein... for anybody who hadn't read Firestorm, was actually, for a while there, independently Firestorm as like this fire elemental. And so I don't know if they're introducing elements of that in this, or if this is something completely new in a different direction they're going in with Firestorm, taking it to the next level in the new step. I don't know, but it's fascinating for me. Do you guys have... And Dan,
I have a thought, just from the way that those pages are written, just from some of the dialogue and from the way the scene is written. It's kind of horrifying, personally. But, it's saying it's a third and final stage. And so much of a part of the character so far has been these two sort of beings coexisting. And even in the image and in the writing, it seems to suggest that they are going to actually merge completely.
And become one person?
Yeah, and because I'm seeing it in a couple different possibilities. One is that it stops being a floating head and they actually become one person, or they are separated completely, and it becomes something else entirely. But it seems to imply that they're going to merge.
Well, yeah, and I kind of agree on that, because I was thinking, maybe we're going to get a complete merging, because if you think about what the entity told them, Ronnie needs to hit the books while Jason needs to get his head out of the books. Jason needs to get a life and embrace life. Ronnie needs to focus and be able to know what the molecular structure for this is. How right now he always has to ask somebody, hey, what's the structure for this? Hey, what's the thing? The reason maybe is they're going to be their own separate entities. They're not going to have somebody to rely on and a crutch, to lean on, and that's where it's going. I'm thinking maybe we will get maybe 2 Firestorms out of this, or 2 heroes based off of the Matrix, based off of what was Firestorm.
See, and I took it completely differently than both of you, in the sense that, and I don't know there's probably some little elements of what each of us are saying here that make the right answer. Who knows? But the way I took it it's funny how we can all read the same story and we're seeing it in 3 valid different ways. And I do think there's validity in what both of you just said. I guess what I took it as the problems that Jason and Ronnie are having right now, and the reason why this entity is even able to have any kind of control at all, is because the two of them have been so chaotic, they haven't been merging properly, that there's room for something else to control this consciousness, this entity that they're making. And by Jason learning to relax a little bit and not be so critical of Ronnie, learning to maybe see Ronnie's side of things, and Ronnie learning to see Jason's side of things, when the two of them merge, they'll be able to make a stronger merge and they'll be more in control of the situation. And because they've left open an opening for something else to have some control here. I don't know, though. It was funny when I heard Dan talking about a merger. I'm kind of like, well, no, I kind of see that. Like he was making that horrifying point. I'm like, okay, I kind of get that too. And when you were saying yours, I was hearing your points, and I'm like, well, that kind of makes sense too. So I don't know that I'm sold. I'm not even sold on what I'm saying here, other than the sense that I think that it's an interesting story because there's a lot of possibilities on what this could mean. But I do think whatever it involves on some level improving the merger. And I think we've all got that in common in what we're saying, that the merger right now is not going the right way. And there is an alien body that is there because of that. And whatever this next stage is either them improving their connection and still remaining individuals. It's interesting when you were saying 2 separate firestorms. It wouldn't be the first time it's happened in Firestorm. I'm hoping that's the direction, isn't the direction it goes in, yet I see the possibility of it from what you're saying.
I don't know. It's it's one of those things where we mentioned it earlier when we were talking about this. They gave us a bunch of information, but there's still these great mysteries out there. You're like, where are we going with this? Come on! It's just a brilliant tease and just a writing thing to draw us in, wanting more.
I do think one of the things that what Dan and I are saying has in common, and that doesn't mean that yours isn't valid, Jim. I'm just saying that we do have something in common in what we're saying. In order for the two of them to create a proper merger, whether they remain one entity, like Dan was suggesting, or 2 separate entities, or 2 separate people, like what I'm talking about, they have to, on some level, understand and embrace each other and kind of see each other's side of things, which right now they don't seem able to do. They seem to be softening, but it's not as much as they were. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, there's an image, in the middle of the page where they merge, and the way that, that's what I was saying, is I could look at it 2 completely different ways, which is one, which is literal, which is they actually physically merge, and the other one is where it's a lot more metaphysical and a lot more symbolic, where it doesn't have to be physical, but you guys have to come together. It's the only way you're going to defeat him. It's the only way, you're going to keep him from destroying me. You have to come together.
Something you say on the show a lot about leadership.
Yeah.
They're reluctant to merge. They really do not. Ronnie right now, for obvious reasons, because of what happened to he's defensive, because of what happened to Jason's girlfriend and stuff like that, which I do not believe I know Ronnie didn't do it. It was the Black Lantern firestorm. Ronnie has memories of it, but he did not do it. I have to wonder if the Black Lantern in there is keeping them from Why does Ronnie know all this? Well, the Black Lantern's feeding him. Is the Black Lantern feeding him this information to make him feel this way, feeding into Jason's anger to keep them that way, forcing Jason to be more kind of like, I've got to be the responsible one here. I've got to be the focused one. I've got to dig in, it seems like Jason's running away from life because of what happened to his girlfriend, and Ronnie's living life way too much.
Well, he's trying to drink away the memory.
Yeah, and it really is the message there. I take that they've got to, and either there's got to be a proper merger there on some levels.
You just want to sit there and just go, come together right now.
So I don't know. I'm really enjoying, and I didn't want you to sing, but
right now, Firestorm.
Oh wow! Yeah, I knew you were going to go there. I really like the story, though. The Firestorm story is fun. It's funny, the more we talk about this, I said earlier that Dead Man is my main lock-on, but I don't want to detract anything from any of the other stories in this. Actually, let me approach that question that I asked earlier in a different way before we go on to talking about Hawkworld, because that's where I really want to go next. Is there a story you guys aren't liking? Or one that you're kind of like, I feel like it's lacking right now or anything? Because I don't find any of them, boring, or I'm finding all of them fascinating and engaging, but that's my take. Dan, I think you were...
No, I love them all, and that's one of the things that I really appreciate about this book in general, is the fact that these are all characters, like I said, I'm not familiar with them, and I'm learning about them, and I'm learning about them because they're all great. Now, there are... some of them I have to work harder. I have to look at it a little bit more to understand, but I enjoy them all.
Oh yeah, same.
Absolutely.
Same. There's nothing that I would even remotely say isn't it. They all equally are pulling me in, equally have me interested. Even when things weren't, how I said, Boston Brand wasn't on my top of my list, and he's rising up. Even not on the top of the list, I was still fascinated and curious and really wanted to see what was going to happen next.
It's funny, as we're talking about this one, maybe this is the way to make anthologies work, because there's always a thing that anthologies don't sell as well, because they're separate individual stories. In this case, it's kind of an anthology in the sense that you've got many little stories that are going on, because they really are separate stories, yet there's one overarching thread that interconnects them. You know there's going to be an end game that interconnects this, but along the way, because of the way that they're set up, we're getting to know each of these characters as individuals or pairs, like Dan mentioned earlier. They're paired with people, and we're getting to know the pairs that way. Maybe this is a way to take some of these characters in DC that quote-unquote don't seem to work in series and getting people attached to them, because I gotta tell you, there's so many out of this that I would love to follow in a series or a mini-series. I'd really series. I don't want to say mini-series because it really makes it seem like I want them in a finite thing. Aquaman and Mira, I really want to see in a series after this. Well, let me ask you guys this. Is there somebody you really would like to follow in a book after this, that you're that invested in 7 issues in? Is there anybody?
I mean, I would follow them all. I would say the one that if they all disappeared, which Hawk and Dove, I'm assuming, aren't going to, Dead Man, I'm very fascinated. One of the things that's interesting about it to me is that it almost feels like, and they are all connected, it feels almost like a team book, but where all of the different members are on separate missions, but like they're all part of the same team. That's what it feels like to me.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, before this discussion, before issue 7, I would have said at the end of this, if I don't get a Boston Brand title out of it, I won't feel like, okay. But now, depending on where Boston Brand ends, I may want something more. Because he, as I said, he was one of the lower level characters. I was curious to see where his story was going to go, but now he's rising up again in the listing. So I'm like, before I would say Boston Brand, I want a cool story from him, but now looking for a lengthy series afterwards. Now I'm like, he's starting to rise up in my stock. For me, it's always been the top of the listing for all these was Aquaman and Mira. I wanted a monthly series of just her rebuilding Atlantis, just from how cool she seemed in Blackest Night. So now add him to the mix. I'd like to see him get cleansed, be the real Aquaman that he's supposed to be, maybe introduce Aqualad into the series, have the 3 of them under the sea, doing their thing down there, kind of, the Guardian of the Sea, rebuilding what is Atlantis. I have all these ideas on how you could use these characters. I think it would be a really neat series, really just, excited. I would love to see that series when this is all said and done. They're my strongest passion. Now, I'd, of course, would follow a Hawk series. Hawk and Dove, I'm loving them, and Birds, and Ronnie and Jason are starting to rise up on the listing again, so I'm like, hey, maybe a Firestorm series would be kind of neat.
It's funny. My answer mirrored yours pretty closely up until something Dan just said that made me think of this in a completely different way. I've mentioned on the show multiple times I'm a big fan of anthology titles, and one of the things I'm loving about this is it feels like an anthology, but it has the benefit of being an interconnected story in the sense that there's an end game that definitely pulls them together, and like Dan said, gives them a team feel. Even though they're working independently and they don't quite realize it yet, there is a team aspect to what's going on here. But we get the benefit of exploring them like they were in their own series right now in the way they're being presented here. I'd actually prefer, like, when they're done with this, to do a Brightest Day 2 or a DC Universe series where maybe it didn't use the exact same characters that are in here, if they didn't fit, but they did something similar to this where it had, like, an overarching story where they would all interconnect somewhere in the end. They weren't quite where that would go, but yet did this type of thing where they were spotlighting these characters like Aquaman and Mira. I would love to have Aquaman and Mira in there, the Hawks in there again. Maybe some of these characters that don't work in their own books, giving them that kind of team aspect that Dan was just saying, but the freedom to be able to tell individual stories focusing on them where it fits in the storytelling. So we get to know them as individuals instead of just members of a team. Like the way they're presented right now. This is working because we are getting what would be considered separate stories for them within an overarching big theme here that works. So when he said team, that really made me look at this in a different way. What would I want after this? I would want more of this. To continue this type of storytelling with these characters where we get to see, like Dan said, all of them. or most of them, if they don't all fit for whatever they would do next. Plugging in maybe some other characters that are lesser known, that maybe wouldn't work in their own solo series, but would plug into whatever they would do next with these characters. Because this is working because of the way that they're spotlighting each character. There is nobody in this that I don't care about. I like everybody. agreeing totally with what Dan said. It was funny. My answer was very different. I was thinking I would definitely want an Aquaman and Mira solo series. I definitely want a Hawk solo series. I mean, that kind of goes without saying with me. But I'm going to agree with you, Jim, when you were saying really heavy edge on I want more Aquaman and Mira right now. They are super cool. And, I'm a huge Hawk fan, so I'm not saying I don't want a Hawk series. That's huge up on my list. But I'm giving a slight edge to Aquaman and Mira with how cool they're being written in this. But now I'm going to go totally on what Dan said before. And no, I would like to see more of this team aspect. I don't know if that was what you were presenting, Dan, but when you said team, it clicked with me on that.
Yeah, I hope I'm remembering this correctly. Forgive me if I'm not, but I believe one of the things that came out of San Diego was, I believe somebody actually asked Johns if we would be seeing Aquaman, or it may not have even been him, it may have been somebody else in his own series, and they said no, but you will see them.
And you're 100% correct that was exactly what was said at the con. Because I listened to all the podcasts from San Diego, and it was Aquaman series was mentioned, and it was like my hopes were crushed. But I loved the fact, one of the things, you probably noticed this as well, Dan, I loved the amount of people that were asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the implication that I got out of that was, and this is why I think it's okay, and even better in a certain way, is that it sounds like there's a plan.
I think there's a big plan for
all of them. I think, they kept saying they were brought back for a reason, and I don't think it was just a story reason. I think it's the character usage. This is a great way to relaunch some of these characters, bring them back, kind of, bring them into the fold, and maybe get to flex some of the DCU has a lot of creative characters out of a lot of interesting things that storytellers could use and could, use well in different tales. So I think this is a way to bring them back into the mainstream and bring them back into the limelight.
We've seen in the last 4 to 5 years a lot of attempts to take some of their smaller characters and relaunch them in a variety of different ways, rework concepts and things like that, to try and get people interested in concepts that didn't sell before previously. And meeting with moderate success, and some of them doing well for a little bit, then kind of drifting off. People are heading in different directions with them. I've really enjoyed seeing the different explorations. One of the books I'll shout out right now, All New Adam, I thought was a brilliant comic. Mm-hmm. I loved it every month. Ultimately, the comic, though,
it didn't make it.
Yeah, but it wasn't due to quality.
Oh.
It just, people didn't pick it up. They didn't get attached to it. And I think if people tried it, they would have. But they didn't. So I think what they're looking at, maybe, and I might be misreading this, is let's try some different ways to get some of these characters out there other than doing solo series. And this may be what Dan was mentioning there, where he was saying, well, we're going to see him elsewhere. Maybe there's a plan to do other types of experiments like this. And I prefer keep doing everything, because like I said, I hate seeing Blue Beetle's another great example. Brilliant series. Loved that. Manhunter.
Yeah.
Great. I mean, all these are series that I really liked. I was very sad to see them canceled because I was enjoying following, and I would have continued following those characters for years in their books. Ryan Choi, I mean, when he was killed, that hurt.
Yeah, that was pain.
But that's with trying those experiments and seeing that these Magog, I don't know if Magog was meant to be as finite as it was. I'm getting the impression now with what we saw in this with Max Lord that this was the plan all along. But I don't know. Maybe that was brought into play because of where Magog's series was going. I don't know.
Actually, let's bring up Magog real quick.
Sure.
Max Lord's plan was, they said, Magog will plunge this world into war. Stop the war before it starts. They're not telling Max Lord take out Magog. They're saying stop the war before it starts. Now, Max is gonna, think, okay, I got to take out, he's gonna go for the easiest way, take out Magog. But what if, Generation Lost, Justice League Generation Lost, that's dealing with the Max Lord story, what if that JLI reunion is dealing with this aspect? So maybe they're going to stop Magog from doing the war and stop Max Lord at the same time. Maybe the way they can stop Max Lord is by, accomplishing his mission before he does. So Max Lord doesn't accomplish his mission. Max Lord doesn't receive true peace, true life, because I'm just going to keep calling him JLI, because that team accomplishes his mission that's supposed to happen, but do it a different way, not kill Magog or not, kind of deal.
Dan, are you reading Generation Lost?
You know what? I'm not, and it's strictly for budgetary reasons. I started reading it and I loved it. Now I'm just hoping that I'll be able to catch up on it eventually when it comes out in trade. But what I read, I loved.
The only reason why I even brought that up, I don't want to go heavy into it if he hasn't read it yet. But it's
okay.
No, it's interesting. I keep wondering, what is Max Lord doing here? What is he doing to the former members of the JLI? Is he manipulating them and moving them into place for his greater plan? Because sometimes, Max Lord can be a crafty little dude.
Yeah.
On the surface, what we're seeing with Max Lord what's really going on, or are we going to be swerved? Or are they going to stop something that they shouldn't? Which is another possibility. I'm like, whoa, or, are they going to find out that maybe Max is up to is what he should be? I don't know. I'm very curious.
Well, Max, in the series, Max is saying how he's bringing them together for their greater good and kind of stuff. Maybe the JLI stuff takes place after issue 7 here. Maybe it's after Max has learned, okay, you were brought back for a reason. Here's your reason. He wants to get his old team together to stop Magog. Maybe we're going to see that, or maybe it's just Max Lord being Max Lord, because he is a manipulative, evil SOB, and he's a great villain out there, and it's kind of that was the thing that as soon as I saw that, I was like, ooh, that's kind of interesting. I'm wondering if it's going to be a nice tie-in or a connection.
I want to take a look at Hawkworld real quick if we can. We see that this world has different tribes that have different allegiances. How will Carter's tentative allies react now that they see him as the one who is prophesied to destroy their world? And I'm kind of like, where did this prophecy come from? Is it real, or is it something the Queen and Hathset have promoted? It could be a prophecy that they could be slandering Hawkman. Or the prophecy could be genuine, where they know what's really coming. There's lots of unanswered questions here, and this is another great build to the mystery that's going on. The Queen is a new wrinkle in this story that I really like, because, we had Hathset, and it was heading down a path that I was like, well, but didn't we do this already? Now this Queen is adding a little twist in there. What is her deal? And Hathset seems to be following her. Is Hathset manipulating her, or is she really running the show, and he sees her as being somebody that, like, this is somebody who I've really always wanted to follow? I'm curious to see what that relationship. It's a new direction for the Hawks. Who is Carter supposed to stop from leaving? The Queen and Hathset, or the creatures, or both? I don't know. I'm very curious in this whole thing. What do you guys think is going on there? Because that's a story that I don't want to diminish my love for what's going on with the Hawks. I think why I'm sounding like, I'm like more blown away by Aquaman and Deadman is not because I'm less interested in the Hawks. I love the Hawks. I knew this was going to be good. So I guess I'm sharing my surprise over Deadman and Aquaman and Mira, how enjoyable I'm finding them in this, because I didn't believe I would find them on equal footing with the Hawks. I figured I'd be like, this is a great Hawkman book, and everything else, and his amazing friends. Where really in this one, it's really what Dan was saying before. Everybody's so great in this one, and that's what's surprising me. But this Hawk stuff, I'm finding downright brilliant. It's a new this Queen is adding a whole new wrinkle in this Hawk world. Came in at the right time for this series. What do you guys think's going on there? Jim, go ahead. You look like you're ready to.
Well, I had a notion popped in my head when we're talking about Queen, and you look at Hathset in the vision. He's got the wings coming out of him. He kind of looks very hawkish. What if the Queen is Kendra? Everyone's saying, what happened to Kendra? What happened to Kendra? What if we're going to find out, and maybe within this process, she's got the darkness inside her. She's got the, whatever the what is the Black Lantern, what is that evil kind of essence inside her.
Like we're seeing in Firestorm?
Like we're seeing in Firestorm. She has that version. Because in John's story, he's got that kind of Martian that's a little bit darkness inside the Martian. So maybe Kendra has this darkness inside her, making her, not know who she is, or it could be how we saw with the Black Lantern Hawks, kind of a little bit twisted on the knowledge. So, maybe that's why Hathset's found his queen. This is a Hawk who's got a piece of Shayera inside her, who's kind of has a connection with Shayera, but is also darkness and evil like him. He's found his Hawk Girl, so he's found his mate. Maybe that's the first thought that was popping in my head, and it's based just solely on a what if kind of deal, because I really don't know. I know the history, but I don't know the history as well as you guys do. So it's just kind of I wonder if this is.
Well, I don't know it.
Oh, okay.
When you were mentioning that with Kendra, and Dan, I'll go to you in 1 second, buddy. My one caution with it being Kendra when we saw that whole twist of lives from Shira, we saw Kendra's life in there. Which leads me, because remember we saw that in that in one of the previous issues. So that leads me to believe that she is a part of Shira. But I'm tentative on that because I do think the bones have something to do with this. So I don't know. And I think there's a deliberate reason, like if this queen has to be somebody, and I think the queen's being kept off camera for a reason right now. So I don't know what it is. I don't know. So I'm not going to say no, but I'm not. Kendra seems like but there being some collection of the black energy or something like that. I guess I don't see all of the black. I know that the Black Lanterns are supposed to make an appearance again.
Oh, okay.
It was on one of the preview images or something like that. But I think the Black Lanterns that are making an appearance again are going to be these characters because they're not 100%
alive. They're not 100% alive yet.
But I think what we're seeing with Firestorm is what we're going to be seeing of the Black Lanterns until then. Because I think that's because of the Matrix. I might be wrong, though. This may be a twist where we see something a little bit different. Because I think we're seeing in each of them their own little quirks with it. Dan, what are you thinking's going on there?
It's interesting because I would say, and I made a reference to this earlier, if there's one story that I have to work really hard on, like following, it's the stuff that's going on with the Hawks, and I would say it's because I'm not familiar with really any of them, but the major reason is because the mythology is so dense and there's so many references to it that very often in any of the issues, when you get to to the Hawks, I will, even the first reading, I'll go through those scenes 3 or 4 or 5 times, just because I'm trying to put everything in place, and I enjoy it because that's the story that is kind of really engaging my brain and my mind and trying to sort through all of that. I have no idea. I would say I'm not getting the impression that, I don't know who the queen is. I'm not getting the impression that it's Shira just because of the way that the scene plays out. But I don't know. I think it's a big mystery.
Here's an interesting thing, and just to make you guys feel more comfortable with this, I've read the Golden Age archives of the Hawkman. I've read both of the showcase volumes, which collected the entire Hawkman and Atom series. So it's everything. They've collected all that in showcase. I've gotten, over the years, a complete run of the work of Tony Isabella, from that Shadow War of the Hawk into the Hawkman series that launched after that. I've read all of that. I read Hawkworld and the series that continued afterwards that turned into Hawkman Post-Zero Hour. I've read all of that now. And then I read, the stuff with JSA, with Johns, and that he did with Hawkman. And All-Star Squadron with him. So, I've read a lot of Hawkman. I'm just as confused as you guys are on what's going on right now. I'm asking the same questions. Oh, it is. And I guess what I'm saying, Jim made reference to before, and you did a little bit, about the fact that you guys are working to kind of understand the mythology and all that. I'm saying that I understand the mythology, at least as well as it's been. It is a character who's had a convoluted history. John's found a neat way to kind of bring it all in together, but there is a whole lot of stuff in the past lives. Basically because of the fact that he used reincarnation as a tool, went back to the Golden Age. Basically what Johns has said and what he posted in JSA was the idea that all of these concepts and the different series that happened before with Hawkman actually happened because of reincarnation, which means he lived all these different lives. Or at least he had a connection to it, because I know the one Thanagarian one wasn't really Carter Hall, but Carter Hall connected with that character through one of the reincarnations, and there was a merger there, so he has the memories of that character. It's as every bit as crazy as this sounds right now, but it was a neat way to kind of say everything happened before, this is where we're at now. This character lived all those lives, this is who he is today, now we're going to move forward. And that's really what the purpose of what Johns was doing there was, let's not worry about which one of these things happened in the past and try to find a one set rule as far as which of these stories happened. I'm going to tell you right now, everything you read before happened. Whichever Hawkman you were a fan of, it all happened. This guy reincarnates, he's all of those people. Which makes it a little crazy. But it worked, because it kind of summed everything up, and now you kind of move forward from there. What's going on here with this Hawk world, This is a new thing. I've never seen this before. I've seen the Manhawks before. The concept of these type of mythical beasts aren't new to the Hawkman world or Hawkman storytelling. But this place and it opening up through previous bodies, this is all new material. So we're actually all in the same spot. And like Dan said, it's a mystery that we're all kind of on and kind of puzzling out together, and that's what's making it fun. So I guess the only reason why I even brought all that up is to say, guys, I've read all this stuff. I'm exactly where you're at. And that's kind of cool and that's kind of fun because that to me is good storytelling and a good use of continuity, where you bring in elements of the history, but you aren't stuck to it like glue. You are in the same place I'm in, even though you haven't read all that. I'm probably thinking things that you aren't because I've read all that, but I don't know any more than you do. That's a great example of not relying on the continuity, but not fighting against it.
Right.
And that's what I think is working here. And it's a fun story because of that. I think we all think this is a pretty awesome series.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I had to read one book right now, this would be it.
Yeah, you know what?
Yeah, this is a strong book too.
Yeah, this is on my top. This would definitely be in my top 5. I've got, obviously, I'm going to go on the work of Gail Simone for myself.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we're all in different places as far as where we're at. But this would be in my top. If I had to chop down to 5 books right now, Brightest Day would be one of the 5.
Yeah, probably. It'd probably be right up there.
Because it's delivering a lot of characters, a lot of really great storytelling. I don't think there's a missed panel in the book. There's nothing that's wasted.
This is definitely a strong performance, strong team. It is one of those stories where you just got to read it. You want to see what's going on, and I like how when each of them are getting their assignments, each of the Hawks have their own assignment. Carter's is to stop the Queen, and then Shiera's is to protect Hawkman. So it was kind of neat to see the entity say, "Hey, Hawkman, call for back."
And it's to stop the Queen and to stop them from coming to Earth. So who is them? That's what I'm wondering.
I was thinking the Queen and Hathset is them.
But I'm wondering if it's not just the Queen and Hathset. What if it's, the Queen's army? She's planning some kind of... What is she planning? Yeah. Is there an invasion planned, or is there something like that? I don't know. These creatures are not creatures that you see on Earth. What is he trying to prevent there? Shire's got to prevent his sacrifice. What happens if he is?
Well, if he is, then he doesn't come back again.
Right, but also, does that mean that his mission's done as well?
Well, if his mission is to stop the Queen and they kill him, yeah, he's failed.
Yeah. But is he going to, in the process of stopping them, does he get captured? Does he, by doing what he's going to do, put himself at risk? I don't know.
And then Shire's got to save him.
Right. I don't know.
It could be.
It's interesting. I'm very curious to see how all this is going to play out. Aquaman and Mira, let's talk about that again real quick, because he forgave her right away, which I thought was really cool. It showed a lot of... I don't know if you guys were surprised by that. I was, but yet it made sense to me when he did it. I expected him, when I saw the way the cliffhanger was in issue 6, I expected there to be sparks flying here. And yet, when it played out, it felt very natural to me and it felt right. How did you guys feel about that sequence of events where he just kind of said, I know you, I know who you are, basically was the gist there, and cheering off of their history. How did you guys feel about that? Dan, did you think that was...
Actually, it's funny because when I first came to it in the series, I have to jump back a few months to Blackest Night Wonder Woman. And when, in that series, when Mira had that vision that Wonder Woman was reading, and she said, "You never told him," I thought, and I know many other people thought, what was that? What was she talking about? I had no idea. But I trusted that, that it had to be something specific that we'd find out about eventually. So it was one of those great moments of aha. So when it happened, I was like, okay, now I get it. That makes a lot of sense. And I felt the same way you did. I thought, oh my God, how is he going to handle that? Is this going to be a real strong split? But the way that he talks about it makes perfect sense. The words were out of his mouth. I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Sometimes I'm a sucker for a really good love story. It catches me off guard when I see it and when I like it. Like a movie, Ghosts of Girlfriends Past, that had Matthew McConaughey and I can't even think. And I was like, I
was
saw
that Jennifer.
Yeah.
what's her name?
Garner.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
And just, when I saw the previews for that movie, I figured I'm never going to enjoy this. This looks absolutely dreadful. And I've seen it a couple times now on HBO, and I like it. I'm like, oh, this is cool. And I'll sit down, I'll actually pop some popcorn and just sit there and just watch it and enjoy it. And he had the one line in the movie, where McConaughey's telling, I can't even think of the actress's name now, the one who's going to marry the brother, is like, he apologized and you forgave him immediately. That's the strength of your love. And when I was seeing this with Arthur and Mira, I was thinking the same thing. She said, I'm sorry, and he forgave her immediately. That's how much he loves her. That's how strong this love is. And I was like, okay, it makes perfect sense. And it's because it's because of that movie, to be honest, that I'm actually thinking that way, and that I completely 100% accepted it as soon as I saw it, because there is that that connection, that bond between the two of them. And I thought that was just a great thing. I loved it, and that's part of the reason why these two are so high in my list of I want to see more stories with them.
I'm actually going to go and take it to another level and go, I actually really liked it because I was surprised by it. I was expecting the typical sparks and anger and the blowout and all that other stuff. I liked that it felt to me, and I don't know if you guys felt, this was a swerve to me. I'm like, whoa. And I'm like, that's a really cool way to handle it that made total sense. And it actually felt to me, I'm a big sucker for when something in a comic feels a little bit more realistic to the relationship and to the characters. And I was so stuck. It's funny where continuity will sometimes work a little bit against you, not in a bad way. But when he was talking about that Blackest Night Wonder Woman, because of the fact that I knew that their child died, I was assuming that this was resentment that she was harboring over the child. That was the secret. Whereas you guys, probably because you didn't have that history with the character, not probably, it sounds definitely from the discussion here, you were kind of more open-minded into what is the secret and kind of not locking yourself. I was locked into, I figured it out, this is what it's all about, and I was set on this. I don't know if it's such a crutch either, though, because they swerved me in the sense that they went this route with it, and I so prefer it because you see this is a couple that lost their child. This is a couple that got past that and still somehow wound up together. Him returning and all that, and these two still are drawn together after all this time. This does make sense. And you're right, it makes sense. And I loved that about this. It's another great example of where no matter what your reading is, it just kind of worked out, and it fits for everybody. And I think that's hard to do. And I love that they're doing that, though, because it's not a slap to the face to the longtime readers, but yet it's not so inaccessible that it ruins it for people who haven't been reading as long. That's a hard balance to find, because us people that have lived through continuity for entire reading experience, that have been reading these characters since the 70s and all that, we're an ornery bunch when you start messing with our continuity. And yet they found a neat way to kind of keep some balance there. And then they focus on the real mystery here, which is all of a sudden Aquaman finds out that his job is to, as we said earlier, to get to this kid first before they get to him, which I'm with you 100% with you guys. Black Man is a part of that. I'm leaning towards it being Mira's people. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's more to it than that. I don't know, or there's something else we haven't seen yet. But I don't think we've seen Mira's people be such a prominent part of this so far. I feel they've got to be a part of that on some level. Through that revelation, very similar to what we saw with Miss Martian, the white light sprays out again. It clears up the oil spill.
Yeah.
BP would love this. And the fish are alive again.
Yeah. Now, did that completely cleanse Arthur? Can he now start summoning real fish?
Oh, no.
Or is he still at the darkness?
I don't think Arthur was cleansed. I think it's the same thing with
it
was external, not internal. I might be wrong.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I don't think Martian Manhunter, I think it goes back to, I think we got the answer at the end of the issue where we find out that none of them are really alive yet.
Yeah.
So I would say the answer is no. I think that was an external thing like what we saw with Miss Martian. I don't know, do you guys agree? Or
probably. It's one of those things where when I saw that was the first thought I was wondering, is it just completely around him, or is he going to be able to summon fish now? That was something I want to see next issue.
I would just say I don't know. I do want to say one thing is I absolutely love, it's so simple, I love the way the scene ends between the two of them, his last line of dialogue. And whether it's about the fish or whether it's about Aqualad or it's about their relationship, it sums it up. I think this is much bigger than me. It just, it gives such a nice cap to the whole thing. And it does make me think about what her original agenda was and why he would be able to put it behind is because that feeling of like, I don't have time to think about that right now. There's something much bigger going on here than either you or me.
I'm going to agree with you except everything about their relationship, because I felt that was summed up before he had that vision. And when he had that vision, I thought that was when he had that feeling of like, this is much bigger than me.
Definitely, but it's almost like something that encapsulates everything.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
I kind of took it as we're going to need a bigger boat kind of line.
That's a good one.
One thing we didn't talk about, and we'll just talk about it quick, because I can't imagine anybody being less confused about this one than me, but I think it's because this story is going to play out in Justice League. Jade.
Yeah.
Jade needs to balance the darkness. Eclipso, I'm reading Justice League right now. We haven't seen Eclipso there. I don't know if Eclipso is going to play into the current crossover with JLA, JSA, or what's going on there. It would make sense that if you took a look at her in that scene, she looked like she was being entranced by the look on her face.
Yeah,
by Eclipso, maybe? I don't know. Or by the darkness itself, but she's got to bring balance to the darkness, and then her brother will save her friends. What does that then mean for her was my worry there. I don't know. I don't know what that means, but that was one of those parts where I was like, whoa, what does this mean? In a good way. Again, it's another one of those mysteries, but I don't know if you guys had any additional thoughts on that, but I was pretty much so. What I just said right now, it's kind of where my head's at. And in a good way. I'm just kind of curious about it, but...
Yeah, kind of a ditto here. I was like, I'm thinking this is what's going to play out. The Jade story with Eclipso, I'm thinking is going to be after the crossover. Maybe she's going to get pulled out of the crossover story, or I'm not sure. It's one of those things where I don't know exactly where it's going, because this is just like the beginning of that intro of that story. So maybe we're going to get some here, some there, some all over the place. I'm thinking it's going to be focused in JLA. It's going to be the story arc after the crossover.
No clue, but I'm intrigued. It does seem, though, as if the message is just that she needs to have faith, that she needs to go there. It's saying balance the darkness. So if you go there, if you balance the darkness, you need to have faith that your brother will save your friends, but I have no idea.
And that goes with their history of her being the light and him being the darkness, and that balance there. There's a relationship between the two in that respect. So that I don't know. I'm curious to see where that's going to go. Osiris needs to restore
Isis. Free his sister.
As the goddess of nature. And I in a weird way, I was wondering, does this play into the events of Ollie's Forest? Or is there something else there? I don't know. With her being the goddess of nature and that forest being such a huge element of nature, I could be digging there, though. So I'm admitting that I'm trying to make a connection where they're...
Okay, here's an idea. John burns down the forest. Isis brings it back, but brings it back as a real forest, not the mythical White Lantern forest.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying you're wrong. I really am...
Yeah, I was really curious because they only mention Isis. They don't mention Adam. Like, hey, what about Black Adam? Come on, I like him.
Johns did say in one of the panels that the White Lantern constructs are permanent constructs. Mm-hmm. They're not like the Green Lantern ones that'll dissipate eventually or something like that. So if they create something, that's, for example, that would be why the forest would need to be burnt down. They can't just... The White Ring doesn't wish it away. Okay. If that makes sense. Or stop thinking about it like the willpower would, for example. It won't run out after a certain amount of time. So I think that's something that I don't know if they're I don't know that those two storylines are even connected at all. I was just trying to find like how does Isis play into all this? Yeah. And I don't know, maybe that's something that'll play out in Titans in a way that...
that's got to be a Titans story, because we've already seen that's what his end goal is, and that's why he's dealing with Deathstroke.
Well, to bring her back is one of his goals, but that doesn't mean that what happens after she's brought back is going to play out there.
Right.
After she's brought back, it could play out in here.
It can play out
or
in Green Arrow
or in Brightest Day.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And it might be totally something where it's isolated to her coming back, and what the purpose is plays out in Titans, and then, we'll see the end result of that in here. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to play. That's another one where I'm just like I was saying with Jade and the JLA. I'm just as confused with that one.
Yeah.
Reverse Flash already accomplishes. It's like, you're done, dude. Just keep hanging where you're at.
Yeah, well, he's now actually fully alive. So does that mean he's going to be able to do some of his stuff?
Well,
life returned. He's now a full-blown...
No. Life, mission accomplished, life returned.
Right.
Oh.
So life returned. He is now full,
I was taking it that mission
alive.
accomplished, life returned was Barry's life.
No, it's
because
Zoom's now back.
Because if you read the story, the way he implies is that his mission was to bring Barry back.
Yeah.
So I guess when it said, because it says right here, Eobard Thawne of Earth, you have allowed the Flash to escape the Speed Force. Mission accomplished, life returned. So... you took it as Reverse Flash's life was returned because he accomplished his mission
of freeing the Flash. Yeah.
Okay. So you guys read that totally. Now that you guys are saying that, I see that to say. I guess I took life returned to be Barry Allen's, but now that you're saying that, I kind of see it the way. Not kind of. I see it the way you guys do. So he accomplished his mission. Yay! Thumbs up. He's the only one then
so far that
has accomplished his mission. So. Then that puts back on the table what we mentioned before. Unless these guys accomplish their individual missions, their life will not be returned.
True.
Right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking.
Well, if that's the case, then, if you're going to be literal about it, then he's the only one.
So far, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Everyone else is still, some part of them is still dead then.
Now, here's the thing with Boston Brand. Because they're talking about, life is a gift, Boston Brand. The chosen one knows that better than anyone. So this chosen one, who is this chosen one kind of deal? And I was initially thinking, maybe it's Dove. Maybe because Dove had that connection to the entity during Blackest Night. She's got the connection kind of now going on. Maybe she's the one to carry on the ring. But then I kind of started thinking, kind of doing the Matrix type of Neo thing, when Neo went to the Oracle, and the Oracle told him just what he needed to accomplish his mission by telling him, no, you're not the chosen one. Maybe by telling Boston Brand, you have to seek out and find the chosen one, he's going to find out he is the chosen one. Because the whole thing with him is, you've got to live. You've got to live. Live your life. Go after your hamburgers and just experience life again kind of deal. I'm thinking Boston Brand is the chosen one to be the next life entity and or the next guardian or however of the white light.
I love that he's the wimpy of the DC universe.
I have a different thought, although I certainly wouldn't mind seeing that. But my thought, just going off of the words, would be that the chosen one would be Firestorm, and that Boston Brand would serve as a form of a guardian. One of the very few things that I know about Firestorm is I've often heard other characters refer to him as being so unbelievably powerful. And it seems as if it's a character whose power really hasn't reached its potential. And then there's his youth and everything else. The notion of having an older character be kind of a guardian to a chosen one, I don't know, it just, and the fact that Boston Brand has come from death and has the wisdom that comes from that, could make him, if he reaches his potential, a very powerful mentor.
I agree with you that the Firestorm journey will lead to a new phase, but I think it's the third phase that the professor's talking about versus him becoming the chosen one. I might be wrong. I think by beating out this Black Lantern, they're going to evolve to this new, kind of what you were saying before, they're going to evolve to this new phase. I'm not convinced that they're going to become one person, but I do think we're similar in our beliefs in the sense that they are going to have to evolve individually in order to make that happen. Both of our end games, Dan, go to the same spot there. I don't know, though. Yeah. I guess I'm not thinking...
No idea.
And we're all speculating here, so there is no right or wrong here at the moment. I guess my thinking is that if it's not Deadman, because I was thinking the same thing, that Deadman possibly could be the one, so I'm leaning towards that as well as a possibility. I feel if it's not Deadman, I don't think it's one of the 12, is my thinking.
Well, Dove isn't one of the 12.
Oh, you're right. I'm not thinking Dove. I'm not thinking Dove at all.
And here's the only reason why I'm throwing Dove out there is because she is already connected to the energy. And that's why. Because she heard the voice that everyone's hearing. That's what she heard during Blackest Night. And just now when, Hawk is the one who came back, but Dove is actually a part of it. So maybe that's why Hawk has to save Dove's life, because Dove is the chosen one.
Her role right now, though, they're developing such an interesting role for her in the DC universe right now.
Yeah.
That to give her that ring, I'm not saying that what you're saying is crazy, because I see the possibility, especially with the boomerang thing being thrown at her. You got to protect the chosen one. That would be that adds some elements to what you're saying. I guess I just don't see it.
Yeah.
What I just played out there is a scenario where what you're saying could be possible.
Right.
So I don't see it that way, though. I don't see them protecting her as the chosen one. I see Hawk protecting her because she shouldn't die there.
Yeah, as I said, those are my two main theories going on, either Brand or Dove.
Here's an interesting thing. If Hawk gets hit by that boomerang, now Digger has to throw the boomerang at her.
Yeah.
Does it have to hit her for Digger to live?
It just said throw the boomerang at her. It never said it has to hit her.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So will doing that bring him back to life?
Yeah, I'm wondering if.
And then if it hits Hawk, will that bring him back to life?
Yeah. Well, and will it bring him back to life and only for him to die?
In his image, it doesn't show it hitting her. It shows him throwing it at her.
Yeah. And
so will Hawk, by catching the boomerang, will it show to him how much she means to him? Will that change their relationship?
I don't know. There's so much that could come out of this. You're like,
Because will that be a part of his life that he's embracing again? Because he's not exactly super happy right now anyway.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I have so many questions there. I don't know who the chosen one is. I agree with you, Dead Man's a possibility on the table. I don't think your Dove thing is so crazy out there. I'm not sold on it yet. I think here's the funny part. Dan keeps mentioning it, because every time we talk about these mysteries, you keep throwing in there, Dan. But that's not a bad thing. I'm enjoying these mysteries. And I 100% agree with you. It's what I like about this story. Every time I think I know something, they'll add a new element and twist to the story that takes it into a different direction that makes me scratch my head further. I am loving this ride. It's a bi-weekly mystery that just keeps unfolding, and they reveal enough tidbits to get me more and deeply entrenched into the story, with more questions that make me want to tune in next week. I'd love this to be a television show.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that there's just so many different layers, and the layers aren't just in terms of plot. I mean, the layers are in terms of psychology and mythology and what everything means. And that's the great part, is it just becomes an immersive experience. So there's an element to me that when we're thinking about some of this stuff, my honest answer is I don't care, because I know it's going to be good.
As we're sitting here, as we're talking, something just hit me, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I can't."
Sorry about that.
Oh dang! Seriously, I was sitting there and I was like, "Why didn't I see this before?" I was like, "Oh my!" And I'm like kicking myself in the head that I didn't think. We're dealing with Jeff Johns, of course, and he likes to go back.
And Peter Tomasi,
both like layered story, both like going back and pulling from stuff from lore. And you think back to 52. Think back to the series, and I know who the entity is.
Who?
It's the second shooter.
That was Countdown. Here's the funny part. You went through that whole ridiculous thing, and you were so totally off base on what you were talking about. That was Countdown. That wasn't 52.
Oh God.
So that didn't work.
And here I'm thinking, this is gonna be a funny joke.
But Jeff Johns didn't write Countdown.
I know.
Wow.
Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
No. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. Yeah.
I had to think about that one for a second.
Yeah.
I wish I had thought more about it.
I'm here for you. I'll catch you every time. That was Trickster and
Yeah, I know now. Come on, I now
Pied
remember.
Piper. Yeah.
We are Crystal Men from Mercury. We have no quarrel with you.
Hey guys, this is Jeff Dyer calling. Enjoy your show. You guys are so upbeat and positive all the time about comics, and it seems like there's always so much negativity on a lot of the message boards, but you guys are totally upbeat all the time, and you always get me excited about books, sometimes ones that I haven't read. So it's just a lot of fun to listen to your show, and I appreciate all the hard work you guys do. The reason why I'm calling, the topic is something that you didn't necessarily bring up directly, but kind of indirectly. You guys were talking about the JLA by James Robinson, and talking about, you know, how much you're enjoying it. I think he's doing an okay job, but to me, it's just not the JLA. It's like a totally different team, and I've been frustrated for several years, wondering why it seems that DC, you know, doesn't just put their iconic characters in the Justice League of America and make it a true, you know, Justice League, at least the way I see it. I know everybody's opinions are different, but I see the Justice League as really the biggest, the best icons of the DC universe. And I think there'd be a way to work around that where it's not necessarily, you know, in continuity. It might be just a little bit outside of continuity, but enabling the writers and the artists to tell the stories that they want to tell while not, you know, hampering, you know, to every event that's going on. But the bigger thing that it leads me to think about is that I think DC should make an attempt to really restore the iconic nature of its characters. And this is kind of a weird concept, but I guess the way I look at DC is Clark Kent is Superman, Bruce Wayne is Batman, et cetera, et cetera. You know, all these years watching the characters be replaced, watching the super teams be disassembled and broken down, I'm kind of weary of that, and I look at the Brightest Day banner that they've got now, and I'd like to see a true Brightest Day in the DC universe where we can maybe get back to the more iconic nature of a lot of these characters. It seems to be starting. I mean, you've got Hal and Barry back. Bruce is, of course, coming back as Batman, Aquaman and Martian Manhunter. But, and this is where my comments might be a little controversial, I'd like to see them go even further. And what I mean by that is I'd like to see Dick Grayson back as Robin, Barbara Gordon back as Batgirl. I'd like to see DC restore the Superman, Lois, Clark triangle where she doesn't even know who he is anymore. I look at what Alex Ross did with the Justice series, and to me, that's really the way that the DC universe, I think, should be portrayed. Now, it could be that Alex Ross and I are about the same age, and the books that we grew up on are the ones that we look at as, you know, the true DC universe. But I'd almost like to see DC do some kind of cosmic reset where we can kind of untangle all this continuity and restore the characters back to what I call their iconic nature. I don't think it would necessarily be going backwards. I think it would just be kind of bringing things back to their truest, best form. Look at The Simpsons. You know, it's been on TV for 20 years. The characters really don't change all that much. They're just very true to their own nature, but yet the writers have never failed to come up with interesting stories for them to be a part of. You know, but at the end of every show, they're pretty much the same character that they started with. I look at something that Marvel did with Spider-Man, you know, the One More Day story, which was pretty controversial, but I really applaud that. I think that Peter Parker should have never been married to a supermodel. Let's get him back to being, you know, the true iconic nature of who he is, and that is the lovable loser. I think DC should kind of take the next step with that, and, you know, rather than constantly replace Superman or replace Batman or break down the JLA, let's get things back to kind of more of a golden age or a silver age, you know, nature to the characters. You know, there's been a rumor that Jeff Johns and Jim Lee might eventually take over the Justice League. Maybe that's true. Maybe they're just kind of biding their time, waiting for the opportune time to do that. I don't know. Seems like a no-brainer to me. But anyway, I hope I have made some sense here, and I'd be interested in your reactions. You know, if you think that that DC could be revitalized by kind of restoring some of these characters back to the way that I remember them, at least, and probably the way a lot of people, especially the average person on the street, would remember them. So anyway, I'll wait to hear what you guys have to say about that, and thanks so much for letting me have a few minutes of your show. Keep up the good work. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
You bring up some interesting points there. I think the tricky part is what is iconic, and what is iconic to who. I'll give you a great example here. You were talking about that you'd like Dick Grayson restored as Robin. Well, to you, that's your iconic Robin. But like Jim, for example, Tim Drake is his Robin. I mean, that's the Robin that he's been reading. That's the Robin he's been loving. He sought out every issues of his run, and he's been around for ages. So, I mean, he is iconic. It's a very tricky balance. When you were talking about your Justice League that was kind of out of continuity, they've done books like that, like Justice League Classified. And I don't know how well those books sell in comparison to the one that's in continuity, for example. The one reason why I'm liking the Justice League so much right now is the direction they're heading in to have iconic archetypes on there. To me, the Justice League, the best runs of Justice League, have been set established teams that have a strong role in the universe. JLA, let's go back to that Morrison run. One of the reasons why those heroes all worked so well on that team, and they were these iconic heroes that you're talking about. And remember, we had on there Wally West and Kyle Rayner, who were the replacements for their respective. And I thought that was a very iconic run that did a little bit of the old, a little bit of the new. And it was a really nice balance and mix of all that, and it felt very iconic. The trick with that book was, and why it worked so well, was it was clearly in continuity and clearly reflected continuity. If there was a change to Superman, that was reflected in that book. That's really hard to do right now, because I think one of the strengths of what DC is doing, this is just me personally, is the fact that there's big events going on in Superman for Superman. There's big events going on in Wonder Woman for Wonder Woman. There's big events in Batman going on for Batman. While there's, as you mentioned, Brightest Day, reestablishing Barry Allen, and not even really, it's reestablishing more Martian Manhunter and Aquaman, who are some iconic characters that you're mentioning. And yet at the same time, they're adding something new to the mythos. And I think you need a balance of both, because for you and I, yes, those characters are iconic. We grew up with them. But there is also a new readership, a younger readership, who needs some new ground floor characters for them to latch onto. And it's a balance of both. I am digging seeing Aquaman back. I'm digging seeing Mira back. I'm seeing them together and this wonderful story. And the great thing is, the way that it's being presented in a way where everybody who hasn't read them before can get excited. And I think this new Aqualad's going to add to that as well. So I think you've got to find a nice balance of iconic. I think that you're right to a certain extent that there was a mistake that DC was making for a while there, where they'd gotten so far away from the iconic that some of their concepts were not grabbing people, like their older readership, the way that they used to. The trick is finding a balance where you tag into the older readership while not alienating the newer readership that have been following other characters. And that's why is Green Lantern and Green Lantern Corps so successful and so exciting right now? Well, yeah, there's Hal Jordan, and that's incredible, but they haven't ignored Kyle Rayner, John Stewart, Guy Gardner, all these other characters that have come along since Hal Jordan that are really exciting. And I wouldn't want to see a reboot that gets rid of characters like that. It just, to me, that would be a waste. And it's almost lazy, because when you do those reboots, a lot of times you just wipe the slate clean and forget about all this wonderful storytelling that's there, where I'd rather see a creative way of bringing back the iconic, like what they're doing with Barry Allen. Because, they're talking about with Barry Allen, they're going to be having this Flash Speed Force book, which is then going to have your Wally Wests and, Bart Allen and XS and all these wonderful characters that people have latched onto. Legion fans who loved XS from the Legion run that she was in. These are characters who people have grown up with and been excited, and they're iconic to them. So you have to be careful with the word iconic, because it's iconic to who? And depending on what era you started reading in, your definition of iconic and somebody else's might be very different. The characters you were rattling off, yes, they're iconic to me. You and I are totally in sync on there. But I don't think that fits everybody. Your out of continuity Justice League book with those characters, the Barry, Hal, Clark, Bruce, Diana. I wouldn't even mind them doing an iconic book like you're mentioning as kind of its own continuity off to the side. I think that's a good way to do something like that. You mentioned out of continuity. It's getting the right creative teams on that book to release that book and have it be in its own continuity. They've done that before with your classifieds. And I don't know if that's what you're referring to, or if you're referring to a book that would have its own ongoing continuity, which would be a step away from what they did in Classified, because Classified was arcs where creators had the freedom to create their own stories from whatever version that they wanted to pull from. And if you're talking about just sticking with a certain set roster and going that route, that would be interesting, and I'd love to read it. I am currently digging the way that this JLA roster is shaping up, though, because they've got a Batman on there, and Dick Grayson, who is iconic. I mean, Dick Grayson is an iconic character. I think there comes a point, though, where it is fun. Like Jim mentions that he would love to see... Talk about the controversial line that you're mentioning. Jim's mentioned on the show repeatedly that he'd love to see, like... Bruce retire and Dick Grayson move on, or Bruce get married and, Dick Grayson move on to then be the head Batman and that type of thing. And he's not alone in those beliefs. The trick is finding a balance of how do I appease the classic fans that want nothing to change, and want things to kind of stay the same with these characters kind of in a certain status quo and they're always in that status quo, and people who want them to continue. As an iconic fan who grew up with, I read tons of stories of Superman not married and all that. I love the marriage. I really do love the marriage with Lois. I think it's really good. I loved the marriage of Peter Parker in Spider-Man, and I read lots of Spider-Man. Marvel Team Up was one of the first comics I read. I was reading Batman and Justice League and Marvel Team Up as a kid. I grew up with the Spider-Man cartoons and all that stuff that I grew up with. Spider-Man has amazing friends and all that. It had a Spider-Man who was a teenager and who wasn't married. I started reading the comics, read Web of Spider-Man, especially out of Marvel Superhero Secret Wars, where we got Spider-Man in that black outfit, and I started reading Spider-Man on a regular basis after that. Again, all this was a Spider-Man who wasn't married. When he did eventually get married, I loved it. I thought it was really cool. I loved the relationship between them. There were some wonderful storylines. Kraven's Last Hunt is one that I always go to that showed a married Peter Parker who went through just a terrible event, but I thought that was an iconic Spider-Man story. There's lots of them. Charles Vest did a hardcover called Spider-Man Spirits of the Earth, which is, if anybody wants to read a breathtaking hardcover, it was a great Peter Parker, Mary Jane story. And, it took place in, I believe it was Scotland. I don't have it in front of me, so I apologize. But gorgeously painted hardcover, and it's one, I've got it in my collection, actually. After recording this, I'll probably go and read it. You have an interesting point there about iconic. You just have to be careful, though, because it's not to everybody. You mentioned the Johns and Lee book. Anytime I ever heard the rumors about Jeff Johns and Jim Lee doing a book, it was pre their new positions that they have now at DC. So I know those rumors were based on a second book, not taking over for Robinson, but an additional Justice League book to what Robinson was doing. That was also before the roster on Robinson's team changed to the team that we have now. And I think part of the reason why those changes happened was because they wanted a book that could stay in continuity, that could have a set Supergirl fills the Superman role. Jade fills the Green Lantern role. You've got Dick Grayson as Batman. You've got the Wonder Woman role filled by Donna Troy. And these are characters who, if you go with Dick Grayson and Donna Troy, iconic characters. Whoa. Supergirl, iconic character. Granted, this is a newer Supergirl, but the Supergirl concept has been around since, the Silver Age, the Gold. I don't know if that would count as kicking off in the Silver Age or the Golden Age. She's been around for a long time. Yes, this is a reboot for today, but it is pulling from that concept. And I would argue that this character now has grown into more of the iconic character with the way that they've kind of gradually developed, especially Sterling Gates and Jamal Igle, the work that they're doing over there with that character, has, without ignoring what came before for this version, have kind of moved her into more of what we would consider to be a Supergirl for today, but yet having those values of the classic Supergirl, the Kara Zor-El that we all grew up with. So it's interesting, when you're saying that you'd like to see them go more iconic, I don't agree with you. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I mean, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I appreciate your call because, like anything, you'll see on the forums, if you participate in our forums, there's lots of discussions where we agree and disagree about and adamantly disagree. And, my stance on Batman, for example, that I wanted Bruce back, there's a lot of people in the forum who adamantly disagree that they don't want Bruce back. They like Dick Grayson more, and they like this progression. And there's a validity to your points right now. There's a validity to their points right now. But that's what I mean. You're kind of really dug in that you would love this iconic return, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm kind of in the middle where I like a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. There's people on our forums who are just as passionate as you are about it returning to the strict iconic, who are just as passionate about let's keep moving forward and let's stick to the iconic values, but let's have a Dick Grayson now as Batman. Let's go the full route and put Bruce kind of in the background and let Dick permanently stay on for this. We really like this. And that's because of the, multiple different positions. I think DC has to try and find a balance where they try to appeal to you, they try to appeal to them, and they try to appeal to me. So it's really interesting. And those are only 3 positions. I guarantee you there's probably hundreds of positions on a regular basis they try to appeal to. And you've got different age groups of audiences. It's really hard to try to appeal to everybody. But I think they're doing a really nice job right now of, like you said, establishing some iconic characters in a way where they're young and fresh. Which is interesting. They're older, clearly, but there is something young, fresh, exciting, and vibrant about what they're doing right now with these characters. And I think they're hitting a home run with that, where they are bringing back some characters that obviously you're latching onto and saying, oh, yes, they're back. Finally, this is what I want. But I wanted it, you wanted to take into another step. Everything you said, I'd love to see in a mini. And I mentioned that before when Jim would talk about this progression in the DC universe where it was more of a real-world feel, where it would continue on and, kids, they'd have children and those children would grow up and we could see like a real progression about that. Those type of things to me work better in a mini or in their own separate ongoing series. Call it Iconic or, DC Iconic or something like that, where you have a Justice League that you would read every month, or Justice League Iconic maybe even. These aren't good titles. I'm just throwing this off the top of my head. But, where you've got a set title that does what you said. And, the truth of the matter is if they released something like that and it took off, then you would see more titles that would lead towards that world because it's selling well. So when they've done these Justice League classifieds and stuff like that, I'm assuming they don't sell as well as the regular books, so that's a message to them saying that people kind of want more of the current continuity in continuity books versus those type of things. I don't know. I don't know what the real answer is. You make an interesting discussion point. There's nothing, and please don't take anything that I'm saying here as invalidating your argument. I'm just kind of presenting a different perspective on it. It's always interesting in these discussions. I can totally see where you're coming from. You're very passionate, and there's nothing but validity in there. But I do think about, good friend of the show, Ian Levinstein, is a huge Kyle Rayner fan. To him, that's his Green Lantern. That was his launching point on Green Lantern. That character is iconic to him. Just as iconic as a Hal Jordan is to you. So I don't think that there's less validity in his feelings than there is in yours. So I think that's where DC they're trying to find balances right now, where how can we use characters that people clearly find iconic depending on what era they got into comics and kind of appeal to as many people as possible, because you can't appeal to everybody. You just can't. But how do we do this and construct this universe in a way where we are using all of the tools and all of the wonderful resources that have been given us over the entire life of the company, the 75 years of the company, without alienating a large branch of our audience. So it's an interesting discussion point. And honestly, if anyone else has thoughts on this, please feel free to call in. I think, or share it on the forums. I think it's an interesting discussion point. I think we're all in very different places because there's a lot of validity to wanting to move forward with a Dick Grayson, as a Batman, for example. And, people like us who would like, a Bruce to stay back. And I think if it looks the way like Batman's shaping up, for example, it looks like they found a clever way to kind of give us a little bit of the iconic and a little bit of the new in what they're doing with this Batman Inc. and this new direction for the Batman universe. I'm very excited to see what route that goes in. And I think more so than not, I think there's going to be Batman books out there that are going to appeal to you. There's going to be Batman books, I like both concepts, so, they're all going to appeal to me. But I think there's also going to be Batman books for the Dick Grayson Batman fans that have been following him and enjoying him that they can read. If they don't want to read Bruce, I'm sure there's going to be books there from the way this is shaping up for them. So I think we're getting more of what you're saying, where we're getting some of both, versus the complete reboot you're talking about. I really don't want to see the complete reboot you're talking about, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way to you. I would prefer to see that in its own book versus seeing them do it to the universe, because I like too much of the direction the stories have gone in. And I don't want to throw those all out the window, because I think that they're very valid, very good stories, and these characters have grown because of the experiences they've been through. And to reboot that takes those experiences away. And, like Super Marriage is a great example of that. I love Clark and Lois married. It's just something that I really particularly enjoy. I don't want every character married. I've mentioned it on the show many times. But I do think it's interesting to have Clark and Lois married. And I think good writers know how to use it. And I think writers who don't know how to use it, I don't think should be on the book. Because I think it's something where you got to get the right writers that know how to use those characters together and to make good advantage of that. Because I don't think, to me, a marriage is a weakness in a storyline. Depending on the characters. Some characters, it's interesting then to add turmoil to the marriage and maybe eventually have the marriage end. Green Arrow, Black Canary is a great example of where the marriage ending has been good for those characters. I find them more interesting now because of it. But I wouldn't erase the fact that they were married, if that makes sense either. I think that Dinah's grown out of the fact, and we've seen that used by Gail Simone, that she's been there and look where she is now because of it. And rather than ignoring it, she's used it as a strength in that book. And Green Arrow has gone to a different place because of it. So I don't know. That's interesting. Please feel free, if you have further thoughts on this or further discussion points, to call back in again and follow up, because I do find this an interesting discussion topic. So thanks so much for calling.
Hey, I just wanted to mention something real quick. Oh, this is Mike, by the way, about the cancellation of Billy Batson and the Magic of Shazam. It's really unfortunate. And I think the one thing that book kind of, maybe not proved, but stated was that Billy Batson and that whole thing as a character works really, really awesome when it's sectioned off in its own little universe. Not that it isn't working in the main DC universe, but the whole idea works really good when it's kind of sectioned off and quartered all to itself, and it can kind of breathe and do its own thing in its own little world, where Captain Marvel is really the only big gun in the universe. And I think that's one of the really strong draws of that book, sort of. And it was kind of thinking about this in general. I feel like a lot of DC titles work really, really well whenever they're kind of sectioned off in their own little thing. And it'd be nice that it's nice whenever some books are allowed to do that for themselves. Because if you look back to the beginning of the DC universe, most of these books were. These books are not like the Marvel books, but the Marvel books were designed to be one real-world city for the long term. The DC books, Batman existed in his own world, and Superman was in his own place, which is why the team-up books such a big deal, because you didn't actually get to see them together all the time. And whenever they merged the universes, some of them were great together, like Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman and Justice League, all that kind of stuff worked awesome together as one thing. Just Captain Marvel has always seemed to be the hardest character to fit from his own personal universe into the DC universe with all of his stuff Tommy Tawny and Hoppy and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's really sad that book is going away, and I know they're doing Young Justice, but it would have been nice to get more Captain Marvel books out there. So, later, guys.
I am totally with you. I'm very sad to see that book go. It's one of those, and I highly recommend it to people. If you've never read it, Jeff Smith did that great run. It was Shazam and the Monster Society of Evil. It was a brand new version of that story, which was then leading into this series. Mike Kunkel took over, and I thought he did an amazing job, and then Art and Franco took over, and then wonderful art there, and then Mike Norton took over, and it seemed to gain a whole new energy and a whole new life when Mike Norton came in on the art, and it's just a book that I've really enjoyed, and you're right, it worked very well set in its own world. Power of Shazam was a great example of that, where it crossed over into, for example, Starman. But that book, when it was out, was one of those books where it kind of felt like it was set in its own continuity. Kind of like what Flash does when it's set in Flash's cities. They have their own tone, their own feel. Yet, I do think the character, and I agree, I know you were saying this too, the character does work in the larger DC universe in the sense that if you write the character in Fawcett City, in his own city, you can give the book its own tone, feel, and everything like that, but yet have the freedom and the ability to bring that character into the DCU, and I think that works. It's one of those books I can't help but wonder if people just shied away from this one a little bit. To me, it should have had more reader numbers because I thought the story was absolutely brilliant. I think because it was in the DC Kids line, I'm wondering if some regular readers decided, it's kind of not going to be for me then. I prefer more of the adult-themed, adult-tone stories, whereas I thought this really was all ages in the sense that the tone, the feel, the storytelling depth really was something that I feel for a lot of kids should be read as a family because of some of the story depth in it, which I thought was really great. I thought it was something that it was. We talk about bridging books. What books can bridge kids into reading today's comics. Billy and Batson was I thought, a great bridging book where the storytelling depth and the amount of dialogue presented was something that it was really a very smart, very well written book that could have been used to branch kids over into the current continuity, for example. So I don't know. I'm really sad to see that go. I know at panels, Gail Simone, and I know other writers have mentioned this as well, but I know just recently they asked at one of the panels, what characters would you love to work on? And she mentioned Captain Marvel. I would love to eventually see whether or not, I'd love to see her get a shot at that, because I'd love to see whether or not that's something she wants in current continuity or to have its own separate feel. Although her books tend to have their own universe, yet they mirror, like Secret Six, for example. Battle for the Cull was going on. Secret Six has had its own tone, its own set kind of universe and feel, yet I've always felt it's part of the DC universe. Battle for the Cull went out and it echoed that and reflected that, where there were two characters in there, in Catman and Bane, that are part of the Batman mythos. And it would be... she took that great opportunity to say, hey, wait a minute, these are two characters that would react to this event happening. And I could see that being a great way to handle a Billy Batson book, where it has its own tone and feel like you're talking about, set in the DC universe, but you don't lose the fact that, there's something unique and special about Fawcett City and the Billy Batson kind of storytelling and the stuff you get from Captain Marvel, and you can do all that while still echoing where it fits for that character the events that are going on in the universe. So I don't know. It's kind of tricky. I'm going to miss that book greatly. And like I mentioned earlier, I highly recommend people picking that up in trade because it's a wonderful series. And I'm glad to see that creative team. And when I mentioned Young Justice, one of the things that I liked was that creative team is moving on to that book, because I think the creative team was excellent. That was wrapping up. That is wrapping up, I should say, Billy Batson, because that's one of those books that. And I'm glad to see that they're giving that book an extra issue, I believe it is, that is going to get a chance to wrap up the storyline they're currently working on rather than leaving us hanging. I'm a big fan of that. Finish the story right, especially with trades nowadays. Let's finish it right so that way when it's on the shelves, people can get a very satisfying, complete story in the Billy Batson trades. And I'm glad that they've at least given it that opportunity. It's another thing where we're victims of sales numbers. It's one of those books, and it's one of the things that on this show, I love that you call in for stuff like this, and I and other people do as well. When you're passionate about a book, especially one that is a low-selling number, please call into the show. Shout it out and tell us why. The why is so important because people listening need to hear why you love a book. It's one of the reasons why I opened up voicemail lines on this show back when we did it. I'm like, should we go voicemail lines or not? And I'm so glad that we've done it because, like your voicemail here, like the one previously, it gives people a chance to get their honest, passionate voice out about things that they really care about in comics. Whether we all agree or disagree or not, it doesn't matter. I want that voice on the show because I think there's some interesting thoughts out there. Might not be mine, but they more than likely are thoughts that other listeners have. And, when we were the last voicemail about the iconic role of heroes and wanting more iconic heroes, I'm sure that he's not alone in that. And getting that out there on the show, it gives something for those people that have been saying, yes, finally, somebody's saying that. Same thing you're saying here with Billy Batson. There's people here who are agreeing with you about Billy Batson, including me, that, want to hear that. And this is something, please shout out books. Jonah Hex is a great book, for example. I look at Jonah Hex sales numbers, I'm like, that book is brilliant. And talk about a book that, yes, it is technically in the history of the DC universe, but it's in its own little corner. That's kind of what I would envision for a Captain Marvel book and how it could work. Being in its own little corner, kind of being set there. First Wave. I'm loving First Wave right now. It's funny, on this episode, one of the books that Jim mentioned that he was considering on the chopping block were the three First Wave books, the miniseries and Doc Savage and The Spirit. I just read the most recent issue of Doc Savage that it puts them kind of in a new status quo. And not in the sense that they're changing anything where the book's been heading. It's illogical from the first storyline, where the whole city was being attacked and Doc Savage is now being looked at as a menace. This is this character who people have looked up to as kind of like this god-like person. He's a human, normal human like the rest of us, but because of his accomplishments and things like that, people are looking up to him as this guy who can just do everything, and it's the guy that they all want to be, that they all aspire to be. One of the things I like about him, though, is the sense that in his world, anybody can die. There's a real sense of danger. It's got that film noir style, and that's what I'm liking about First Wave. It fits what the Shield and the Web, for example, fit in my library. It's kind of its own little flavor. It's kind of its own little pocket. It doesn't tie into anything that's really going on. It's its own flavor, and it's meant to be its own universe. And whereas the Shield and the Web were part of the DC Universe proper, but they always felt to me, too, like they had their own little corner niched out, and I liked that. I quite liked that. So it was something different in my library, and these are all books that I'm loving. It's my passion to get Jim reading Jonah Hex monthly, because I do think it's one of those books that I think is brilliant. I know Jim's a Western fan, so I'm baffled when he tells me he's not getting to that book, because that's one of those books, when I get my stack of comics and Jonah Hex is in there, it's easily one of the top 3 books that I read that week. I always grab Jonah Hex and read it. It's incredibly satisfying when I'm done reading it. Very similar to your passions for like Billy Batson that you're sharing here. And Billy Batson's one of those books too that I kept reading regularly when it came out, especially more as the run went on and I became more invested in the characters. When it started out, it wasn't there because I hadn't quite gotten invested in the flavor and the tone. But once you get there, it's one of those books. And I would encourage anybody, if you walked away from Billy Batson, The Magic of Shazam, give that book a shot in trade, because I know the trades are starting to be released. And give that book a shot in trade and really try reading, the full arc. I think you'll find something really neat. It's a good book for comic fans, in our age group. It's a good book for families. It's got a larger appeal to it, and I'm really sad to see that book is going.
Hey guys, this is Mike. I used to do it on the forums. My name randomly changed to something else, which is really bizarre. But anyway, this is really mostly for Jim. I'm willing to bet that your TV is actually just perfectly fine to run a PS3. Even if that's efficient. The only problem you may run into is that the font on a lot of modern games is designed for HD resolution, and so it'll end up being really small and hard to read on a standard definition TV. But if your TV is big enough, you can be able to work around that a little. So yeah, if you need any help buying TV, you can give us help you out. Go to the forum. So later, guys.
Honestly, if Jim, and he and I talked about this off the air, if Jim was going to be getting a PlayStation 3, which I think he's going to do, he's planning on getting an HD TV with it. But for people that were listening, a lot of everybody has the funds to be able to jump into getting a game system and a new television along with it at the same time. So I was trying to say, because I did run my PlayStation 3 when I first got it for about a good 8 months up here in my office, before my wife and I started going into Blu-rays and stuff, and then I moved it downstairs and got us an HD TV for the living room. I ran it on a standard def television. And there was very few times, I'd be hard-pressed to find a time where I had trouble seeing anything. Now, if I were to go from an HD Now back to a standard def television, it would be painful for me, because I've seen the difference. But I think if you get it initially for a standard def and you set it to the standard definition settings on the console system, you're going to be fine. Obviously, your point is totally well made here. It's, nowadays the games are made with high def in mind, and the resolution works so much better as far as seeing everything. It's crisper, it's clearer. Everything from scores to everything going on in there is much sharper looking. The games are actually crafted for high def. Actually, more so than when the PlayStation 3 first came out, and they knew that there was going to be an adoption rate. The 480p resolution was probably used a lot more in the earlier games, as a baseline, and the fact that you could then run those games in high def, whereas I'm assuming now the way they construct the games, which is the point you're trying to make, is geared more towards the high def audience. The point I was making, though, is that you can get away with a standard def television if you want to component it and go through it in pieces, versus making the decision to make the full jump to a game system and the HD at the same time. So we did have that discussion, and I basically told Jim off the air, I said, dude, you want to get an HD TV with it? And I mentioned that, I think, in the podcast as well. But, that's not fitting into everybody's budget. So I thought it was an interesting discussion point to say you could start off with a standard def television and then gradually work your way up, depending on how people want to go. Or you could go with the HD television first and then save up for the PlayStation 3, just go the reverse of what I just said and go that route. Not everybody can afford to get both at the same time, so you want to address that audience and say, yes, there is the option to run it on a standard def television. And with a lot of the standard def televisions that came out towards the end of that generation, some of those were so crisp that you can really get a nice picture on them to start. One of my buddies runs his Xbox, or for the longest time, I should say. I think he just got an HD TV. So he's been running his Xbox 360 on a standard def television up until about a month ago, and never had any complaints. And honestly, I was over there playing games with them. They looked good, I mean, what did they look high def? No, but they look pretty darn good. Certainly a lot better than the original Xbox, for example. Or the PS2, that's actually a bigger leap. But let's say the original Xbox. The Xbox 360 games looked a lot better than the Xbox games did on a standard def television. So, there's a little bit of that. I was more addressing people's budgets than trying to say what was preferable. I mean, obviously, the idea would be having a huge television in your living room with this incredible sound system that would, but not, who can afford, obviously with a PlayStation 3, the optimal would be having a 3D television because a lot of the games now are coming out with 3D patches. But I know for myself, I can't afford to get to a 3D television. We just bought, about a year ago, a really nice HD television for the living room, and my wife would have my head if I even considered buying a 3D television. I've already been told no. And honestly, with the cost of 3D television right now, I'm saying no to the 3D technology. That would be something that would be maybe nice down the road, but there comes a point, I guess, people have got to look at their budgets and where do you stop, and standard def is an option as a starting point if you're getting a PlayStation 3. Like you said, the optimal and the ideal. A 720p television is really for people looking to do HD on a budget. If you don't have, or if, like for example, if you want to if you have a nice TV in your living room, like a 1080p, and then you want to do something for like a game room, maybe you play games in a den or something like that, a 720p television is great for gaming. You don't really need to go to the full 1080p for that purpose. If you're doing like a second television for that. So, I don't know, it's kind of an interesting discussion point. I'm really excited for this game. I'm like, November can't come soon enough. Just because of... the one thing I'm really disappointed in is there's no cross-platform play. It looks like PC users and PlayStation 3 users can't play together, which was something I was kind of excited about, because I was planning on actually buying the game for both the PC and the PlayStation 3. Now I'm just going to get it for the PlayStation 3. But I know Final Fantasy 11, for example, you could play your PC account on your PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 2. I mean, you could run it in a emulated mode. And that was cool to be able to play downstairs, but then if my wife wanted to use the television, I could go up and play it on my computer, and I'm playing and accessing the same account and the same characters that I would be on my other system. So now I'm really just going to play it on my PlayStation 3 because, I won't be able to access my same characters. So I don't know. It's an interesting... like you were saying, the HD thing is an interesting discussion point. I'd be curious to know what platforms are people buying this game on. There's a thread right now going on the forum about DCU Online, and I'd love to know. Join into that discussion. Are you buying it PC? Are you buying it PlayStation 3, and why? What's driving that decision? I think the game will work well on either platform. It's been optimized in both cases. I do think that maybe the differences between the control scheme and how it works is one of the reasons why they want to make sure that you don't have an advantage on one platform over the other. I'm guessing. This is just me speculating. This isn't something I've read or anything. But I'm wondering if play balance is one of the reasons why they're trying to make sure that one platform versus the other doesn't have a particular advantage. And that might be the reason why. But I'm excited for the game, and I hope whether you're buying it for the PC or the PlayStation 3 that you're just as excited as I am. I think the game's going to be absolutely wonderful.
Green Lantern, let you and I destroy that space junk.
Guys, I want to talk a little bit about something that was on the Facebook page for Raging Bullets, a discussion was brought up. You mentioned on our last episode, Jim, about Batman titles. And I think this is kind of, because we're going to talk about comic budget, you mentioned before, Dan, your comic budget. So I think it's appropriate time to have this. No, I mean, it's an appropriate time to have this discussion because everybody has a different and unique comic budget. And whatever that is, you have to make decisions as far as what titles you follow and which ones you don't based on your budget. Whether you're following one title or 20 titles, or whatever in between, you're making those decisions based on the disposable income that you have that's available for that budget. You made a discussion point. You were worried about the Batman titles. What did you say last time? I don't want to misquote you, or you said something about you were worried about the number of Batman titles that were coming out.
Especially, when you think about how many titles we got going out there, and just, is this going to, turn off whether a newer reader or even someone who has a set budget, like I'm already set at my budget, what titles do I have to get rid of if I want to get all the Bat titles in? And it was just, you and me, we're both getting all the titles. We're going to, do a little twisting and make sure we get it all, but... Is most people going to do that? Are you going to have to make a decision? Do I get all the titles? Do I only get these titles?
No, hold on. And so this is something actually that I wanted to bring up that was an interesting discussion point. You say that we're getting all the titles, but let's take the just DC only out of the equation for a second there, because I don't just read DC.
Right. And
we started this show, I had to make sacrifices for my budget because I don't read everything that's in the previews catalog. I wish I could. First of all, there's two different kinds of budgets. There's a time budget and there's a financial budget. I don't have the financial budget nor the time to be able to read everything that's in previews. When we started doing this podcast, I had to make some sacrifices as far as what I was reading before. My pull list before doing Raging Bullets was pretty evenly divided between I had an independent budget, I had a Marvel budget, I had a DC budget, because I wanted a diverse reading library. When I made the decision to start Raging Bullets and, through our original concept, I'm like, well, it'd be fun to follow one company because Indie Spinner Rack is already out there covering the independents. I'm like, I had a choice between DC and Marvel. So I went with the quote-unquote underdog out of the big two, which was more DC at the time. Marvel had, if you look at the sales shares as far as which the top books were, Marvel seemed to be having more of that, at least at the time. So, and it still seems to be that way. It seems to be their big events tend to sell a little bit more. So it involved me giving up a number of titles. I'm still reading some Marvel books. I'm still reading some independent books, but I had to really change the way my budgeting worked. So when they do this, I do have to make considerations as far as, and we actually had a discussion this week about budgets. Yeah. When you called me up on the phone, you said, talk me down. I'm getting a whole bunch of stuff and I've got variants on there. And Dan just had a discussion with us where he said, but this Justice League Generation Loss, I can't pick it up right now. It doesn't fit into my budget. We all have different budgets to consider. The point of bringing this up was, for any of you, when new titles are added to the list, how do you make a decision as far as what titles to follow and which titles not to? What is your line? What makes you make the decision to follow? Do you follow the character? Do you follow creators? Do you follow specific titles? How do you make your decisions? Because in this case, there's a lot of Batman books that are going to be coming out. I'm excited as can be. I'm not worried about it. I like the creators that are on them. So for me, I'm like, this is cool. But I understood the flip side of it where somebody's saying, my budget won't, I previously collected all of the Batman books. My budget won't let me get this many titles. We're adding more. I don't know what the whole Bat book line is going to look like out of this. Is Gotham City Sirens still going to be around? I'm guessing so, but we haven't had those solicited yet. The books that we're in right now are The Return. We're in that month, so we don't know exactly what the next month's order is going to look like yet. Are all of those titles that we had previously followed still going to be around, or is there going to be some other twist to it? I don't know. I guess, though, it goes back to the original question, forgetting just Batman at the moment, how do you guys make the decision as far as how to budget your comics? Like, what titles are you following? You and I know, are pulling the entire DC Universe line, but outside of that, I'm also reading Vertigo titles. I'm reading some Wildstorm. I've got some Marvels and some Independents. I'm not reading everything I'd like to, though. Dan, what are you reading right now, and how do you make the decision on what you read?
It's really interesting because, unfortunately, a lot of times the budget is it will strictly be dollars and cents. and there may be a title that I'm following that I'm very committed to that I just go, you know what, I can't read it this week. Maybe in a month I can go and I can pick it back up. But what's happened, largely as a result of my getting exposed to your show, because I've been reading comics for 30 plus years, and I didn't follow creators ever. I don't even think I had a sense of writers and artists. I had a sense of the characters. And as a result of your show, I started getting a lot more clued into certain creators. So nowadays, I would say, if I have to make a cut, there are certain creators that I know I want to keep reading those books. For instance, probably at top of the list will be a Grant Morrison, especially, or a Jeff Johns, or something from the Batman line that I'm really, really enjoying. It's a difficult decision to make sometimes.
Jim, what about you?
Well, it's funny, and I keep saying, getting the whole line. I'm not getting the full DCU line. Stuff like Batman Confidential has recently been one of my titles I had to drop because of budgetary as well as time.
Really? So
yeah.
You didn't read the Vampires and Werewolves story?
Yeah, I did not read that.
Oh, that was very good,
I know,
too.
and I heard, but I made the choice, and the reason I made the choice is continuity.
See, I find that interesting.
Yeah, I went, stuff out that wasn't, in continuity, wasn't current continuity. I, put that aside for, the continuity stories. And same thing with the Superman and Batman. I was getting that, and then I stopped getting it. And I picked up the one annual that had the Batman Beyond stuff in it, but I really just picked that up because I wanted to see what was going on with Batman Beyond and all that stuff, because I'm picking up that limited series just because he's a character that I dig. I dig the character from the cartoons. I wanted to see what was going on with it. But, for me, I look, if there's something that's out of continuity, I may not, pick it up. And some of the stuff, like, right now I'm getting the first wave stuff.
You're not getting Jonah Hex.
Yeah, I'm not getting
trade, right?
I'm getting Hex in trade because I'm like, he was a time thing. So I'm like, I don't really. I was running out of time. I was like, you know what? I need to just do that. And like the first wave.
That's a hard.
It's a tough one.
And this is my mission in life. If there's one goal I have over the next year is to get you to reading Jonah Hex monthly again. I'm gonna fight to do it because it's good. It's really, really good.
You and my brother both are fighting that fight. I'm fighting this off on two fronts because he loves Jonah Hex. But
but you'll buy a variant cover.
Yeah, I know. I'm stupid.
But you won't buy
it's just something. For some reason, those variant covers it's starting to pull me in, and it's why I literally, just so y'all know, I literally called up Sean and like, talk me down, dude. I'm looking at that $35 variant cover for Justice League number 50, and I wanted to buy it so bad.
But see, that's the funny part, though. When you say that, see, and I'm not saying you're wrong, because that's just the funny thing. When we talk about this, even the discussion we were having on the Facebook page, I was sharing my opinions based on how I approach my collecting. And there's no right or wrong way to approach your personal collection. There really isn't. It's your personal collection, and that the key word there is personal. So you're going to approach it your own way, and you should feel free to kind of customize it to how it fits into your budget, and just kind of accept that, like, hey, this is what I can fit into my budget. Dan sounds like he's doing that right now. It's hard for me to look at, like, I followed a lot of Marvel before doing this show. I didn't drop any of that because of quality. I dropped that because I needed to make a decision to say I'm going to follow some of the smaller characters at DC that I never followed before. I'm enjoying that decision. It was a great move. But I'm looking at, and I'll look in the previous catalog and go, hey, you know what? I'm going to pull, I have to pick and choose on Marvel titles that I want to follow because time. I don't have the time. But when you say that $35 variant cover, I'm looking at, well, I could pick up this, I could pick up that. That's my Dark Tower, that's The Stand, that's, some books like that I'm really enjoying over on the Marvel end that I'm picking up. But that's not to say that you're wrong for wanting that variant.
Yeah, I know.
That's, for you,
it's my
because those variants are gorgeous. Yeah. No, I mean, there's some really good Gene Ha variants, for example, like that, where I've picked up a couple of them because Gene Ha was doing the art, and I love his art. Yeah. So I get it.
Yeah, sometimes I get
it. I had to drop a lot of Marvel just because of price alone.
What was it when it went to what price point?
When it went up to, when most of their titles are now $3.99, I was already getting mostly DC, but the way that my budget currently works, it's not uncommon for me to say I can only walk out of there with 2 books or with 3 books. And so basically what I did was, these are the titles the titles mostly that I'm committed to are mostly DC at this point, you know, and their Brightest Day and their Return of Bruce Wayne While It Lasts, and Batman and Robin, and when I can afford it, Red Robin, and Birds of Prey now that that's started.
Great.
You know, and those are the ones that, you know, for the most part, I've committed to, and within a month, I can afford that.
So it's interesting to take a look at that, because we all make sacrifices for, because my collection is very different now than when it was almost 5 years ago now when we started the show. What I collect now is very different because of that. So I had to make sacrifices there. So I get it when people are saying, like, I can't get all these books that I want or things like that. I get it. It's very different. Actually, I am buying more books now than I ever did back then, which is why I had to go mail order, because I would never be able to read what I read right now if I didn't.
Yeah, mail order really has saved how much I can get, because you get the discounts. We get the discounts and all that.
My attitude is, this is an entertainment medium with comics. Comic companies, though, because it's an entertainment medium, if they see something that's selling well, they're going to try and capitalize on that. And there would be nuts not to. Movies do that. Television does that, with merchandising and then with spin-off shows and with things like that. If there's a way to make more money and get more exposure to something that's selling well or, drumming up interest, they're going to do that. Sometimes it's to the benefit. Sometimes, like you said, Jim, there's a possibility that it's not. I'm looking at the creative teams that are coming onto the Bat books right now, onto the new ones. I'm seeing so many books. There's not one of them that I'm not excited about. Like when you said drop Batman Confidential, back when I was in college, and this isn't to say you're wrong for doing that, when I was in college and my budget was very limited and I had to only get a handful of titles, I was getting maybe 5 books, there was a stretch there where I was getting, it was either Batman or Detective, one of those two. I wasn't getting both of them. Shadow of the Bat was out, and Legends of the Dark Knight. I was not able to get all of those titles because I was also reading during those times Starman and The Flash, which I was greatly enjoying. So there was a stretch there where I was getting one of the 2 Batman titles. I was getting Legends of the Dark Knight for sure because it was out of continuity. I didn't have to worry about that crossing over. It only did like a couple of times in the history of the series did it cross over. And there was like a one-shot that crossed over into Nightfall. There was another one, I forget the other series it crossed over into. It crossed over into a couple little things, but it was so rare. Otherwise, it was very similar to Batman Confidential, where it was, contained arcs. And that was one of the things that I liked. I was guaranteed to get different creators. I was guaranteed to get what I thought were really good Batman stories, that I would get like a 5 or 6 issue great complete Batman arc in my budget range. And that was one of the draws for it. I'm not saying you're wrong for making the decision you are, but that was the decision I made at that time. And then I got another regular Batman book that was in continuity, so I was in tune with what was going on with Batman. And I was getting Flash and Starman at that point. Starman, at the time when Starman was out, there was nothing that was going to get me away from Starman. But Flash was so good with Mark Waid. I got so into that character. It was bright, it was fun, and it was very balanced. For me, in my mind, it was very balanced, the way that I was reading back then. And then I was also getting Uncanny X-Men, because I was an X fanatic. But I couldn't get the whole entire X line. And there were times when the books that I was reading, Batman or Uncanny X-Men, would cross over into a whole bunch of other titles. I literally, very similar to actually what Dan said earlier, I had to wait for the trade on the crossovers and hope there was going to be a trade, because back when you weren't guaranteed a trade for quite some time. Back with what I'm talking, Dan and I sound like we've had a very similar life experience with comics in that we've been reading the same amount of time. So he can sympathize with me in the sense that there was a lot of times where there were storylines that crossed over. If you couldn't afford it, there was no guarantee you were ever going to read that story. You had to kind of figure out what was going on.
No, I mean, yeah. But, back when I was able to read more titles, they were cheaper, so
sure,
it was okay. The good thing now is that it's actually, it's easier. It's easier to be able to go back and catch up on things. So that's the good side.
And that's where the trade's a good thing.
Yeah.
In the sense that if there's a title that you're like, you know what, I can't afford this right now, and it's a character that I really like, you can wait for the trade on that title and pick up that trade, and then if you find that you like that title, you can sit there and make decisions as far as, okay, do I want to make room in my budget for this title? Is there one that I'm kind of like so on? And embrace that choice. It's better to have the problem to be that there's too many good titles out, and hopefully that's what comes out of this whole Batman thing. I would love the problem to be, for people who are Bat fans that are saying, you know what, I can't afford all of them right now. I'm hoping the problem is that there's just way too many good ones, and you got to pick and choose between your top of the stack off of the good ones, and just say, you know what, these 3 right now are my favorite Batman books right now out of the 3. These are the only ones I can follow. I'm hoping for Bat fans that's what comes out of this, that they get that experience, than for people to say, this is so watered down that I'm not enjoying any of it. I don't see that happening, though.
Not
the creative
the
teams the creative teams that are being presented are so diverse that I think we're going to get different storytelling in each one. My other question is, too, obviously, by now, I think we can stop speculating. There's going to be more than one Batman. There's going to be at least Dick Grayson and Bruce Wayne, which I'm assuming that's how this is going to play out. We'll see. Maybe I'm not thinking big enough, but let's say for right now, that's the way it's going to be. I'm assuming if Dick Grayson's going to get a book, I don't think Dick Grayson's just getting one Bat book. I think Batman and Robin's going to be Dick Grayson and Damian, and then there's going to be another book with Dick Grayson. I'm assuming
Anything is possible.
Exactly, because there's a lot of Batman titles being listed as the ones that are going to be released. I can't believe all of them are going to be Bruce.
No.
I wouldn't wait. And I'm going to say, as a Bruce fan, I have little problem if they are. But I'm pretty set that Batman and Robin by Peter Tomasi is going to be Dick Grayson and Damian. His Nightwing run and his handling of Dick Grayson in that book, if that is what's going to happen here, I think is going to be the perfect marriage of a great book. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping for Batman fans that are frustrated, similar to a discussion that we just had here now, that you can kind of pick and choose between the books that are coming out, between where your interests lie the heaviest, and you find titles that are satisfying you, because I don't see these as being big crossover titles. The Bat books have never been heavy in that. They'll do it for a big story or a big arc or something like that. But I don't see that being, I've never seen that as being like where the Superman had the numbered bullets.
Right.
That's something that Batman has never done, except in
the big stuff.
Yeah, where it was a huge crossover. So very rarely did that actually happen. It's a lot closer to what we see today, where you could be reading Batman and Robin independent of what was going on in Batman or in Detective or things like that. So I'm hoping that stands still and that people can, embrace choice and just pick their favorite books out of the batch, and hopefully get creators.
I think part of what happens sometimes is that very much like sports, comics. It's an emotional hobby. I've seen people spend ridiculous amounts of money for sporting tickets, or get upset if they can't afford to see this team or that team. And it's the same thing with comics. It's an emotional hobby. People get very, very attached to certain things, and it's, as the prices go up and as it becomes more difficult, it's just, it's difficult. That's all.
I want to read, like when I see the previews catalog every month, I want to read everything that's in there. I mean, there's very few things. I shouldn't say everything. That's not true. But more often than not, 75% of the catalog interests me. Manga, and I like independent books. I like Marvel books. I mean, I like a variety of... unfortunately, as you can tell from this show, I have very diverse tastes. My passion for all these comics, when people are like, well, how do you like this? I hated this. It's because I really have diverse tastes. That doesn't mean that I'm more right than somebody else is in my tastes. It's just one preference. The unfortunate part about having diverse tastes are you tend to like a lot, and I've got a stockpile here. Jim, you can look at my bookshelf right here of things that I want to read. I don't have time. I get these things. I don't have time to read them. But yet I do have a stopping point in my budget. I have to. We all do. And that's something that's very tough, I think, in comics because of the fact that it's a serialized medium. If, like Dan mentioned earlier, if you're behind certain characters, not just the creators, if you're behind certain characters, these creators work really hard to get us interested and to care about these characters. What happens when you do? Well, you want to follow the creator when they jump off a book to a different position, but then you also want to follow this character that they've got you invested in. So it becomes one of those hobbies where sometimes in your budget you have to make a decision. Do I follow the creator Do I follow the character to the new creative team? Very hard decision to make. You know, if I had to make the decision right now, Wonder Woman is a great example of that. Gail Simone has gotten me so invested in the character of Wonder Woman. Love that character. I really am enjoying what Straczynski's doing right now with that book. But it was interesting to say, what would I have had to, if I had one book to make a choice on? Gail Simone was leaving off of that and going to Birds of Prey now. If I had to make a choice between the two, I love Wonder Woman. I love what Straczynski's doing. This is not a knock on it. I would have gone to Birds because I would go with Gail's writing, and I know that I'm going to get what I'm looking for in Birds because I love the. It is also the fact that I love Birds of Prey. It's entering into that whole thing as well. It's like the band's back together.
Largely what happened to me. I mean, she's a writer that I want to be able to follow, and okay, so she's got 3 books now. I can't afford. She may have more, but she's got 3 that I can think of. I can't afford to follow them all, so I'm following Birds of Prey.
You're getting your Gail fix.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to be getting Secret Six, but between the 2 of them, I've read both, and Birds of Prey is a little bit more up my alley, so that's the one I'm going to stick with.
Yeah, that'd be.
Don't even ask.
But,
I couldn't.
You sometimes I've had to do that before. I've had
I'll
to make
sell
those,
blood.
Yeah. But see, I had to make those decisions. And I mean, you saw what I told you what my list was. There was a point in time where I was getting one Bat book, and I traded off between Batman and Detective. As far as I got Batman for a little while, then I got Detective for a little while. Now, see, here's the funny part. People say, well, you've got a broken run there. No, I don't. There was a time when I went back and got the issues that I was missing. But I'm lucky that I found them all. So I now have complete runs of both Batman and Detective. But there was a 2-year stretch where I had to really cut back my comic budget. It was very hard to do. I was getting 4 titles. 5. No, I'm sorry, 5. I was getting 5.
Yeah.
And it was very tough. It was very tough for me because there's a lot of books that I was watching going on. The Bat books rotated a lot. Very kind of like what Dan was saying as far as I get Red Robin here and there. I was in that position where I was getting, I was trading between Batman and Detective and Shadow of the Bat. It was interesting having that discussion this week. It's been pretty hearty on Facebook under Raging Bullets, and feel free to add us, please. And I post on there sometimes as Sean Whalen and as Raging Bullets. Feel free to add me on my personal page too, because you've got your Sensei or Jim Segulin. You have your page, so please feel free to add us both because we both post on there. There's a Jim Segulin, there's a Sean Whalen, there's a Raging Bullets one. But that was the guy started posting it there, and it was a very good point. And I understand the frustrations, but it's a good frustration if they're quality books. Because, at least those choices are... Because, Dan, like right now, your pull list that you're pulling, the comics that you're pulling, do you feel satisfied with those books? Are you happy with the choices you've been making?
But that's part of what I was saying is I think people get emotionally attached to characters. And so when the prices go up and they can't afford to get every Batman book, they get upset. They're, and it's understandable. But that's why you kind of have to look at it and go, okay, I can't afford to do all of this, so let me kind of take a step back and look at it and go, what can I afford to get and still be satisfied, with what I'm getting.
And that's what I ended up doing back in the day. Right now, I'll give you a great example. I started following the most recent X-Men crossover, and it's really good. But the problem was I kept finding that if I started reading that time-wise, I didn't have time to get to the things that I wanted to read on the DC end, which are things then we'd be discussing on the show. So I made a decision. I'm like, quality-wise, I was liking all of it just the same. I had to stop picking up the crossover. And I figured, that's one that I'll pick up in the trades, or Marvel's great with their hardcover collections and stuff like that. I'll go and read that when, I have more time to sit down and read it. It's probably going to be a next summer thing, because summer's coming to an end for me. So now my time for reading comics is going to be cut down drastically. And unfortunately, I have to make that sacrifice in those decisions just because of time. It's not there right now. And budget-wise, I couldn't see, my wife will kill me if I keep adding titles on. So I literally had to make a decision and say, what's a reasonable budget for me where I can follow the things that I want to follow for the show? It was interesting, Jim, that you brought up titles that you had dropped, because I didn't know you dropped Batman Confidential, which I think is interesting, and your reasonings why. Now, with Batman Confidential, will you then pick up arcs of those, like this Vampires Werewolves one?
Oh yeah,
do you see yourself picking that up? And are you so you're not like done with Batman Confidential? You'll pick up arcs and.
I see myself picking up that one. The plan wasn't to pick up the plan wasn't to go to trades on it. It was
just to let it go
and say, it was fun. I enjoyed reading it. It was not dropped due to dislike. I really did enjoy it. It was.
Did you read the mini Superman and Batman Vampires and Werewolves that came out a while back?
No.
This is a direct sequel to that. So if you're interested in it, I would recommend picking up that. That's collected as well. Yeah. I would pick up both, not to throw another thing.
Another thing for you to buy.
But knowing, I guess why I'm so shocked by that decision was not.
You know how much I love that genre.
Vampires, werewolves, all that. I'm like, wow, you really missed that arc. I'm like, whoa, because it was really good. But if you didn't pick up that miniseries, I would actually recommend picking that up first, then picking up this when it's collected and enjoying it that way as a way for you to get it. I understand why you did what you did. I'm loving Batman Confidential. So
there's other titles right now that are on the chopping block. They're not.
What are ones that you're questioning? I find that interesting.
The First Wave stuff. Now I'm loving First Wave. I'm really enjoying reading it, but I am looking at especially like when I went to Italy, I got really far behind. I started looking at the sheer number of titles I was getting. Then I really started looking at how much per month I'm spending, and I was like, there may be some titles. What can I? And I started looking at what fat could I trim, what titles could I trim, and those things stood out and glared out just because once again they weren't direct continuity. They were just
their own
continuity. So I'm like, you know what? I dropped the Wildstorm line because when I was making. So
you might be borrowing some stuff from me if we talk about it on the show.
Yeah.
Which is interesting as well, because that was always interesting when we did it back in the past.
Yeah, with Wildstorm stuff, I dropped the Wildstorm line. Once again, I was really enjoying that whole Armageddon, everything they did with with completely basically destroying the planet, and then the heroes had to reform what they're doing and rebuild and the reconstruction. I was like, man, this is a neat concept, this is a neat idea. But again, I was financial and time-wise, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to just focus on DCU continuity. And I started dropping that. Now I'm still holding on to a couple Vertigo stuff because I can't part with them.
Are you reading Sweet Tooth?
No.
You have to read Sweet Tooth.
That's one I think is going to be a trade. I'll do trades on that maybe, but I haven't even
I read 11 issues of that in one night. Not because I had to. I'd gotten behind on it. And it was honestly one of those where I was like, you know what? This is similar to what you were saying. I'm like, time-wise, I'm not in there. I started reading. I like to read stuff before I drop it and just kind of go, okay, is this something that I want to let go of or am I into it? I sat down and I had read the first 3 issues and really liked it. And then I just got behind because of when Mariah and I went on vacation and then the end of the school year and stuff like that. This title had come out during a really crazy time for me. The premise behind Sweet Tooth, for anyone listening, is the Earth it's like one of those Armageddon, everyone's dying from a disease. Throughout this time, these hybrids of human-animal mixes have started, so it'd be like a person with antlers. It would be a person with a pig face. It would be where it's human and animal mixed. These kids started being born from human parents with these kind of strange mutations. So everyone was under the assumption that these mutations came from whatever's killing people. And the mutations were living. So what would happen is, what do you do if you're a normal human and you find these mutations are living? Well, your whole species is dying out. So what are scientists going to do?
You're going to catch them, cut them open, figure out what's going on.
Exactly.
How do I fix me?
And what's the moral implications of that? Is that the right thing to do? Because these are your offspring. So is this the right thing to be doing? And that's the dilemma of this book that it's presenting. I'm captivated by this. It's so cool. And the kid you're following, Sweet Tooth, is half reindeer, half human, and all that. When you look at the cover of the book, the thing looks ridiculously cute, but it looks ridiculous too. When you read the story, it is so deep, and yet there's a fun factor to it. And then here's another twist in the whole doggone book. What if the mutants came before people started dying? So now, are the mutants the saviors, or are they the cause? This book is filled with all kinds of deep layers and stuff like that. This was on the chopping block for me until I read 11 issues of the thing. Pretty captivating, isn't it?
I hate you. I really hate you. Just so you know that.
But it's Jeff Lemire who's doing the Atom backups that are in, right now, Adventure Comics. This guy, I read The Nobody from him. It's interesting, though. I go through the same thing you did. And Sweet Tooth has been something I've been wanting to talk on the show, so I kind of took this time just to, as long as we're on this topic, it was a book I was considering very similar, like you were saying. I do, though, when I go through to evaluate a title, I take a look at my budget, and I start reading the ones that I'm considering chopping, whether it's DC, Marvel, Independent, whatever. I start reading, even if I'm backlogged on it, I'll read a couple issues and say, okay, do I want to drop this one, or do I see myself spending a lot of money to go back and try to collect this thing later? What's an easier way for me to budget it out? Should I drop something else instead? It's hard to make a decision. Like Dan's saying, it's an emotional hobby. It's hard to make a decision as far as which is the right one to drop and say, I can live without this, or for me, the problem is, which ones am I going to go back later and spend money on shipping, because I've done that before, where I'll start looking online for books on eBay. I'll look at different comic shops that sell online. I'll go to my locals. I'll go to conventions and start digging. Am I going to spend more money doing that on a title, or is it better for me to keep this one and maybe drop something else? I'm still cutting and paring down the budget, but when you're collecting more titles, it's an even harder decision when you have to pare down because of lack of time or things like that. Sweet Tooth is one of those, though, clearly from my little rant right now. Sweet Tooth's not on the chopping block. There's a lot of other things that will be on the chopping block before Sweet Tooth even comes close, because that book is just plain... I literally... Mariah was like, are you ever going to go to sleep? And I said, this book is incredible! I read 11 issues in one sitting. And
That's
I literally,
impressive.
and I started at 11 o'clock at night reading it. I planned to read one or two and then read it for a couple of days. Dude, I swear it was 4 in the morning by the time I was done. I just kept going on this title. So that's a compliment for Sweet Tooth and lack of sleep.
Now I'm even more intrigued, but I'm still not going to be able to buy it yet. So.
Yeah. But it is one. It's actually one that I
I'm very
recommend.
intrigued.
And it is being collected in trades. It's one of the great things about the Vertigo line. People are looking for, hey, I'm interested in Vertigo. I'd love a trade recommendation, something to check out if I find it. Because a lot of conventions and things will offer 50% off trades and things like that. So if you're looking for something to pick up to try out, this Sweet Tooth is very cool. It's very deep. I will say this. I just read issue number 12. Issue number 12 is a great jump-on issue. For anybody who wants to get kind of a flavor for the book, it's all told from a scientist's perspective as far as what's happening. It starts a new arc. It's completely lays out what's happening in the series right now for anybody listening. But I do want to recommend the book because I think it's a high-quality book. And one of the things I always like to do on the show is for people who are looking for a different title, is to give it a little bit of love. This has been 12 issues of pure joy. I can't believe it was ever on the chopping block, and it really wasn't an issue of the title. It was I hadn't had a chance to get to it, and now that I have, he's got me I'm not only a fish on a hook, I'm flapping around. I'm actually kind of happy to be on the hook. And it doesn't hurt. You thought it would. You know what? Let me ask you guys this question. Can you think of a title you dropped where it was so hard you had to drop it, you had no other choice, but it was hard for you to drop? Was there that title that was hard for you to drop?
Oh, yeah. Recently, very recently, because I was enjoying it a lot. In fact, most of the titles I've dropped, I have enjoyed, but American Vampire.
Ah, because of budget reasons, you had to drop that one.
Yeah, I mean, it was that simple, and I went, okay, I know this is a popular book. I know it's not going anywhere, and I know I'll be able to get in trade eventually. And I know that part of the problem is, or the fear is that type of thinking is what gets books canceled, but sorry.
You have a responsibility yourself to say, well, this is what my budget is. So right. I totally understand that.
But that's what I mean. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, look, there have been times when I've been able to buy whatever I wanted, and then there are times when I haven't been able to. So most things are out there. Most things are out there for you to go back and catch up on.
And Scott Snyder, who's writing that, is going to be writing Detective Comics, which I'm really excited for. He's a very good writer. And like you said, it's a popular book, so it's one of the good things about Vertigo is you're pretty much so guaranteed that Vertigo titles are going to wind up in trade. So it's another opportunity to catch a title on if you've got a trade budget, or if hey, every so often I have a month here and there where I can get a trade or two. That's a good way to follow those titles if you can't afford them in the monthly format. What about you, Jim? Has there been a title that you've dropped that...
Gen 13. I loved Gen 13, and it was one of those things where I was like, I'll just get Gen 13. because they, it's in the universe, but they don't completely cross over. And I was just like, I'll just get that. Then I was like, well, there's not that many times. And I was like, no, I got to stop now, Jim. And that was one that really, it hurt, because I really enjoyed the crew. I liked, those, couple of the characters. I was like, man, this is a cool character. It was, just a title that I enjoyed. And, DMZ's another one where but I went to that one. I'm on trade. So
let's do an episode before the end of the year of titles we've dropped, where we just pick up single issues of them to see if it was a good decision, how we feel about those titles, things like that, because I think that would be an interesting episode. It's a great way to touch on those books still, because, we could even say, wow, I really like this book, or it's still budget-wise, it doesn't fit into my schedule, but we can still talk about and really look at the book objectively. It'd be fun to have that discussion coming from the standpoint of, hey, I dropped this, but here's where it's at now.
And we can call the title, let's get Jim hooked back on the title.
Well, but...
Because I'm a junkie, man. Yeah. One hit, and I'm back on I'm back on it. So.
Well, it's the only thing, because you mentioned that because I'm reading the Wildstorm stuff. Yeah. I'm a little behind on it, but it's the same similar situation that I mentioned with Sweet Tooth. I'm not reading if there was a stretch there where you and I were reading everything that Wildstorm was doing, including the miniseries. I'm not. I'm reading the 3 books. I'm reading The Authority, I'm reading Gen 13, and I'm reading Wildcats. I am reading those 3 titles right now. And then, of course, Welcome to Tranquility, but it's separate from all of that events.
I'm still getting that one as well.
I know you're still getting Welcome to Tranquility. I'm enjoying very much the world has been laid out there, but it's one that I tend to stockpile that because of time versus enjoyment. They tend to be really good. I tend to do the DCU stuff because that tends to be the major focus of the show. Vertigo stuff, there's nothing I've really dropped yet. I've stopped getting, which I hate doing, as many of the original, because they're doing so many original hardcovers now. I haven't been able to, I pick and choose on those. I was getting all of the crime novels when they came out. Now I'm picking and choosing on those because I don't get to them. As far as in the sense,
it's hard to find time to read them.
Yeah, and that's really what the issue was. So now I find that I still get them, but I pick and choose based on, every 3 months I seem to have time to get to an original graphic novel, so I get that. Because DCU's publishing those original ones, like that Arkham Asylum Madness, which came out. Did you read that one or get that one, the Sam Keith one?
I got it. I haven't had a chance
to
read it.
It's really good. It's 24 hours in Arkham. For anybody who's interested in this, Arkham Asylum Madness, it follows a nurse working at Arkham Asylum through a 24-hour day. And
there's a lovely thought.
Yeah, but it's all from her perspective. And you're right, it isn't a very lovely thought, but that's the interesting thing about it is just what you said. It follows her through a 24-hour day, and you see her thinking about her child and her home life. And she's new at Arkham Asylum. So she's dealing with people who've been there forever, some of whom have developed appropriate survival skills, others of whom haven't, and all of the nonsense and insanity that goes on in that place going on around them, like, Killer Croc and how is he fed, and, the Joker and what do you have to deal about with him, and the fact that people have died in Arkham Asylum who have worked there with the Joker. What is it like to work in this place with everything in place to try and protect the people that work there, but it not always working? She's somebody actually talking about budgets. She needs to work there because the family needs money. And in this economy, it's hard to find.
It's a good job.
Work. And it's a good job with reliable, benefits and pay.
Good pay, but it's, it's high risk. It's combat duty pay.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a very cool story to take. It comes from the perspective of a worker in Arkham Asylum. It's by Sam Keith, art by Sam Keith. Gorgeous looking book. It's a great original hardcover. But stuff like that, I've got to say, okay, this month I'm getting Arkham Asylum Madness. There's 3 Vertigo original hardcovers coming out. If you include the crime line and stuff in there, I'll pick one. It becomes decisions that you have to make and factor. And touching on what Dan's saying, if I find that I have time and go back and read them, like this summer, I never picked up Absolute Planetary. For your birthday, I was like, what can I get Jim that I know he won't have that I've heard's really good? I bought you Absolute Planetary Volume 1. I got myself a copy of it as well. And I'm really enjoying it. They have the whole series is collected in 2 volumes. That was something, though, when it originally came out. This is the second printing of Absolute Planetary Volume 1. I passed it up the first time around because I didn't have the space in my reading to do that. I am so glad I picked it up this time around because it's a wonderful series. It's something I've been enjoying reading. We were talking actually over, my wife and I were eating dinner before we were recording, and you came over before our recording, and we were chatting about the ghost story that was in there. It took place in Hong Kong, and there was this ghost cop, and it was this really cool, interesting story, and there was it was a single issue story within in Planetary, where the team met this Hong Kong cop, and it had this mythology of the fact that because some great wrong happened to him, he's stuck in this position as a ghost cop until another person is wronged or, in a similar way, and they will take over that place for him. There's only one at a time, but, he's stuck in that position. And there was, at the end of that story, it was so cool at the ending, there was no resolution. The ghost cop was stuck in that position. Like, the Planetary didn't rescue him. They just happened to be on this adventure with this guy because it happened to take place in Hong Kong. I don't know if this character ever appears again in Planetary. I got the impression that that's really up in the air as far as whether or not there would be a reason for him to appear again. It was just a cool story. It was gorgeous. The artwork's fantastic. It's a really neat series. I'm very glad that I picked it up. But again, it's something that I passed up in the past, like Dan was saying, and I ended up getting now because time-wise and financially, it was a better move to do it now. Because I was getting one for you, and I would be jealous.
Yeah.
That's the junkie aspect you mentioned before.
Exactly, man.
When I was a kid, pretty much with how much they cost, I could afford whatever I wanted. And that's not the case anymore. So,
well, how much were you reading as a kid?
A lot. At first, a lot, because this betrays my age. But, when I first started reading, they were 25 cents. And I remember reading them when they were 75 cents. But when they were 25 cents, it was, as a kid, very easy to come away with 8. And I do remember around the same time period I'm guessing that you're talking about, I can remember there were 3 titles. I'm pretty sure there were like 3 titles that I read, which would have been Amazing Spider-Man, Legends of Dark Knight, and Batman. Pretty regular, and that I could afford.
And you're right, the price difference was a lot different during that time. Because, like you said, going back to under $1 to, at the time that I'm talking about, the comics were over $1. They were actually, what's the price of that Shadow of the Bat right behind you? That's $50.
$1.95.
Okay. It was well before 50 that I'm talking about of Shadow of the Bat. It was during the early run of Shadow of the Bat, but they were at least in the $1.50 range. And,
yeah, I remember getting those too.
Yeah. That was hard. It was hard cutting. Or maybe it was close to 50. I dropped that. What's the date on that 50?
May of 96.
Yeah, no, yeah. So it was shortly would have been before that. I couldn't imagine doing that now.
Oh, God, no.
But you have to.
Yeah.
If what your budget is. And Dan's right. Comics cost a lot more now.
To be nostalgic about it, which I am, it's too bad, because I can remember a time when it didn't matter how old you were or what your financial situation was. Everybody could enjoy the hobby at the same level. And that's, it's just not the case. But it doesn't have to diminish your enjoyment of it.
It does make it interesting to me as far as, we talk about this as fans who are already reading it. My concern is always, I feel the quality does not match the current readership. I don't know what the jumping on point is for new readers anymore, though. Do you give somebody a trade? Do you give somebody single issues? What would you give somebody?
Trades.
Trades?
Yeah. I found.
Give them a complete storyline?
You give them a complete storyline so they see what is going on. Like, oh, that's kind of neat, and maybe they'll become, and you run into them becoming always a trade person, where they always want the complete story, but it could be enough of a taste to get them in.
That doesn't hurt comics either, though.
What's been really interesting to me is that I have a fair amount of friends that read comics but don't read anything superhero, don't read Marvel or DC, would read more independent. And the best tool that I had to getting them to appreciate stuff with DC, all of the animated stuff, which they loved.
Because there was a tie-in. And when you say the animated stuff, you're talking about like the JLU stuff, or?
I'm talking about all of it. Like, for instance, even for myself, when I first started reading more and more DC, and I wasn't familiar with the world, I started watching the Justice League animated series. And through the course of both series, and I guess that's 4 seasons, there was so much that I was introduced to in a very short period of time that helped me understand the world very quickly, much more quickly than reading 20 trades. And it introduced me to characters that I then sought out. And the same thing with the animated films. You know, somebody that their only knowledge of Wonder Woman was Linda Carter, and that animated film is incredible. And they got very excited about it.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that. Just taking it outside of DC and just in comics in general. For a while there, I would have never suggested giving media tie-ins to people to introduce them to comics. You know, like, because media tie-ins were, there was a stretch there where most media tie-ins were very hit and miss, and usually miss. You get a few gems in there, but media tie-ins were usually kind of watered down. They weren't quite as good. Lately, it's been the opposite. It's usually most of the media tie-ins now, like, I'll go, for example, Buffy, the Vampire Slayer. Yeah. I would have no hesitation handing Dark Horse's Buffy the Vampire Slayer comic to any Buffy fan and saying, here, read this. It continues where the TV series left off. You know, that's season 8.
Yeah.
That's great. It's brilliant stuff. I know you were a fan. I never read the Angel comics, but I know you've read those. And
yeah, the Angel After the Fall stuff and all that. Yeah, it was the same kind of
Angel fan. That would be a way. Fringe, for example. I just read the first Fringe miniseries that came out from Wildstorm. I read it on the DC app from for the iPad. I read it on there, and I've gotten this summer. I've been watching. I'm on halfway through season 2 right now of Fringe. This is my first exposure to Fringe. I was watching Fringe. Mariah and I saw the pilot, and we were watching so many TV shows during the time. We watched the pilot and kind of walked away from it. This summer, I watched season 1, loved it so much, I'm watching season 2, getting all caught up on Fringe. I got into it, so I'm reading the comic now from Wildstorm. Really good. You know, the first one, I know there's a new Fringe miniseries out now. I have not read that yet, but the first miniseries is very good. I would hand that to any Fringe fan and say, hey, here's a reason you should be reading comics. Look what this medium can do and the kind of storytelling. Those are some good bridging pieces, going off of what Dan's saying, to introduce somebody to the concept of comics and the kind of storytelling. And if they like that, branch into more. But our friend Chris Kendall, who's been on the show a couple of times for Smallville, he reads a lot of Green Lantern and stuff like that in trades. I think he's getting Brightest Day now in single issues because he got, like, Green Lantern Happy, which is a good thing. But he read Sinestro Corps War, and then Blackest Night, I think he had to have gotten the singles because he was telling me, I think he was collecting them as it was going along.
I think
he read I know he was getting Blackest Night in some of the miniseries as that was going on. But, you know, he got into Sinestro Corps War and Rebirth and stuff like that through trade. And Hush and stuff like that. He bought, like, for example, Batman Hush and For Tomorrow and stuff like that. He read those in the absolutes. So he got into trades. And trades are a good bridging point, like you said, to give somebody a complete storyline to introduce into comics. I do feel that this medium, one of the things that hurts us as fans is, and why books that we like that are smaller books, quote-unquote smaller books, because I really think this medium in general isn't getting the kind of readership it deserves. But I think one of the things that hurts us is, how do we get these new readers into comics? I love choice. You know, I don't get mad when I see more titles coming out. The previous catalog is filled with stuff that I want. It's stuff that I would love to read. I make that tough decision that the guys were talking about with Batman on Facebook every single month. You and I just had that conversation. So we don't have an unlimited, income towards this. So it is one of those things where I make those decisions as well, and it's tough. I do get concerned, though, that books get canceled. And that was one of the themes that came out with it as well, is what happens to these other books. I brought up Jonah Hex on there, not because I think Jonah Hex is in danger of being canceled, but I know it's got those numbers that kind of skirt the line. And I bring it up on the show constantly because I think Jonah Hex is one of those titles that it skirts the line. Is it a top 5 or a top 10er? As far as it's definitely in my top 10 list of titles. If I had to chop down to 10 books, Jonah Hex would be there. I don't know if it's quite in the top 5, but it's darn close if it's not. And it's one of those titles that I get worried about when you see too many titles come out. Is that going to, some of those readers from Jonah Hex who are Batman fans, going to maybe drop some Jonah Hex? That's where I get worried.
Yeah.
I don't get worried about how the Bat books are going to do. I get worried about what happens to these other titles. So that's where my concern ever comes in. And I think the problem is still that we're trying to divide the market between the fans like us that are already reading, as opposed to reaching out to people outside.
I think in a certain sense, there's a level of patience that's required. I think you're absolutely right in terms of it's not getting the readership it deserves. Mm-hmm. But part of, I think, or at least what I think I'm seeing, is I'm seeing it enter the mainstream popular culture for the first time. And it's becoming more and more consistent. And given some time and given some element of development, I think you're going to see it. I think you're going to see more people get pulled into that as the companies are getting smarter about how do we expand this.
I get encouraged when I see good movies. Like I saw The Losers with my wife the other night. I knew I was going to like it because it was a comic spinoff and, it was a tie-in and I was going to enjoy it. My wife really enjoyed it. And then we also watched Kick-Ass, which we both really liked. Which I had never read Kick-Ass. Now I want to read it because I enjoyed the film so much. So it was something, but my wife loved it. So I agree with you in the sense that I think more and more, I want to see the Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which is coming out too. That's another one that, was based on another comic series that I'd love to, and I never read that. So this is one that's probably going to get me to read some Scott Pilgrim as well. But I'm encouraged by seeing those things come out, and hopefully if they do well, it'll, like you said, Dan, just bring more notice to comics. I am encouraged by companies like Marvel and DC now forming these bubbles where it's like DC Entertainment and Marvel under the Disney banner, and we're going to see some more promotion of not just the films and television, but hopefully some tie-ins to like the graphic novels at the very least, introducing people to those, and animated series coming back. Because here's the thing, when we were talking about animated series, like Batman Brave and the Bold, wonderful animated series. But it wasn't, I loved it myself, but Justice League Unlimited was more geared towards an older audience, if that makes sense. It could be enjoyed by, Batman Brave and the Bold could be enjoyed by our group. I loved it. So I'm not knocking it. Please don't take me wrong there. But I'm talking about as far as the tone of Justice League Unlimited, a much darker, much more adult tone of the series. So you could hand that cartoon-related tie-in to an adult, and the cartoon matches the adult crowd, if that makes sense. I'm hoping that this Green Lantern series that's going to be coming out of the film is more geared towards an adult crowd. I'd love to see a mixture of animation. All ages animation, like Young Justice, stuff like this Batman the Brave and the Bold that's been coming out. They said they're considering maybe doing a Lego Batman comic. I know that was when they did the all ages panel. They said there was something that's not an announcement, but they were saying that we look at stuff like that because of the appeal of the Lego games. Saying should we be hitting this all-ages crowd? The Lego games are huge. Yeah. So that would make sense. It's kind of a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you do a Lego Batman comic to appeal to a younger audience who are playing those games? That makes sense to me as well. I'm glad to see companies taking a look at how can we get to an audience that isn't reading comics now that should be. And I'm not sure I wish I had an answer. Digital's not the only answer. I think it's one step in the right direction. The fact that they're doing all this digital exploration, I'm glad to see them doing that because it shows that they're trying to reach out to a new audience. And I'd like to see that for comics because I do feel my frustration isn't so much there's too many titles. I think there should be more. Not because
one of the good things they were able to do with Brave and the Bold. I mean, I agree with what you're saying about it, but I do think what they were able to do is go, okay, there's two different audiences that we can get here. We know that we have an audience of older comic book fans that will watch this, and they will, and they will enjoy it. But the other thing that we can do with this is we can get the younger people and introduce them to all of these characters that they don't know. And I think it was very successful in doing that.
And I totally want to see that, and I agree. Everything you said, amen. What I want to see is take it one step further. In addition to that, I would love to see different tiers of animation onto, like this Green Lantern Corps cartoon. I'm assuming because it's a movie tie-in is going to be geared towards more of a Justice League Unlimited audience than a Brave and the Bold audience, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, but what you're seeing right now, which I think is what is going to be happening more of, is we're getting more of the actual creators of the comics involved
Yeah.
in these media tie-ins.
Yeah. And that was happening with Justice League Unlimited. There was a number of episodes that were written by comic creators on that series. And I think that was the start of what you're talking about, where you're seeing more of them coming in. I think that was like, hey, why don't we do more of this? And it worked so well because there were some great episodes put out by comic creators.
The most successful, or in my opinion, I should say, the most successful of the DC animated movies have been the ones that had a direct tie-in to a character, to a creator where the creator was involved, either directly where they were, writing the script like Under the Red Hood, or directly based on with their involvement.
Or Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman I thought was very good.
Yeah,
and Gail
Wonder
Simone was
Woman,
one of the people behind it.
New Frontier.
And what worked for me on Wonder Woman was that was an original story for that, but yet it had a feel that felt very genuinely Wonder Woman. So that's interesting. We could probably go on for this one for hours, but it was just interesting. I thought it sparked some interest on there as far as I think what the final message of this is, and it's something that I firmly believe. It goes back to where we started. Your collection's your own. It's personal. And it's tough to make choices whenever you have to sacrifice comic books. But I think, to me, and one of the key themes that I hope always comes out of this show is, whatever your budget is, make sure you're pulling your best of the best books. If there's something in your pull list, if you're pulling 3 books, and 2 out of 3 are knocking your socks off and 1 isn't, change it up and find that one that is. Because there's so much comic product out there, so much to choose from. If you can't open a preview catalog, if you can't walk into a comic shop and find something that's knocking your socks off, I am a firm believer that you're not really trying. Because there's easily a title to replace that one that's a little mediocre in your list, if there's one that, because our tastes are going to be very different. Mm-hmm. Pick up Sweet Tooth. I'm a big Sweet Tooth fan. Because I want that continuing forever. I love that book. Kids with Antlers. It's awesome. In a post-apocalyptic world. It sounds cool, though, don't it?
Yes, it does.
Because it's more than just kids with antlers. It's the whole other twist.
Yeah. Grr. I hate you.
Jeff Lemire rocks. Dan, I want to thank you for joining us. This was long overdue, and I really had a fun time chatting with you, and we'll definitely have to do this again.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you to you guys for having me on. It was great. It was something I was looking forward to, and just thank you for what you guys do. It really is a service to the comic community, and I know I appreciate it. So keep up the good work.
Well, thank you.
There they are, all alone except for that old character.
I want to remind everyone to check out ComicCollectorLive.com. ComicCollectorLive.com, your comic book management source. On a personal note, I want to give a quick shout out to all of our listeners. July, we had an amazing amount of downloads, and June especially, too, as well. This summer, it seems that we're getting a lot more listeners checking out the show, which means we've got some old listeners who are coming back and trying out the show again, and welcome back. We've got some new listeners who are trying out the show, and I really want to thank our fellow podcasters, friends of the show, listeners, who have been letting people know about us. Podcasts rely an awful lot. These are labors of love that we do. We don't make money on this. We don't have an advertising budget or things like that. So anything you guys are doing to let people know about our show is just greatly appreciated. And like I said, this summer I had to call Joe up and say, wow, we just had a lot of extra downloads this month. And I just really want to thank all of you for that, because it is something I encourage you to do, not just for our show, any podcast you're listening to. I've been a big fan on this podcast of cross-promotion, and it's something that definitely, please make sure that you're out there. I know it takes like a couple seconds. Do those iTunes reviews. Let a friend know about it. Let your comic shops know about it. Podcasts are really here to support the comic book community. And, please, if there's anything on our website I can shout out or promote, on the show I can shout out or promote, please let us know. It's ragingbullets@gmail.com, and we just really appreciate everything you guys do as listeners to get the word out about our podcasts. Because this is something where it costs not just money, but time to put together a podcast, and we really appreciate the support you give us. And that's where it makes it a partnership. I want to remind everyone to check out ragingbullets.com. I'm back into my school year mode right now, so I'm getting my classroom set up and things like that. This next month is really incredibly hectic for me. Ragingbullets.com is when you'll find out information about the next episode release. One of the commitments we have with the show is to do 4 a month for podcast episodes. So we might stray a day here and there when things get hectic to make sure that we put out a quality episode for you guys. But I want to make sure that we did that all through 2009. It's something I'm committed to try and do in 2010 as well. And so far, we had 5 in July. We've had 4 every other month, and it looks like we're really going to make that goal. So I just want to thank everyone for the patience in the episode releases. The website's always the best place to find information. I post there first with details on the show. If you want to have a column or a blog or something up on the website, I always consider that to be community-based. We have some new We&rsquo nows up there. We have regular blog posters that post on the website. But if you want to add your own voice to it, if you have an idea for a column or a blog, or even if you just want to do a one-off where you're like, hey, I'd really love to rant and rave about this and I'd like it someplace where it's posted permanently, feel free to shoot me an email at ragingbullets@gmail.com. That's really what I consider that website for. Consider joining our forum community and our Facebook community. It's wonderful. Jim and I both have personal Facebook pages, as I mentioned on there, and feel free to add us as friends. And like I said, we love that interaction, community interaction. And I want to thank everyone who posts on our forum because we just wonderful discussions that come out of there and Facebook and everything. Our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. As I mentioned in the beginning, over at DCBService.com, Brightest Day 11 and 12, each only $179. They're $2.99 regularly, $179 each. The variant edition hardcovers are $4 each. That's DCBService.com, your comic book pre-order source. Over at InStockTrades.com, Jeff Lemire's Sweet Tooth, 128 pages. Writer-artist Jeff Lemire. Regularly $9.99, 37% off, only $6.29. That's for the first 5 issues of this wonderful, wonderful book. And if you listen to the second segment on this episode, hopefully that'll get your teeth wet. And you're like, I want to read this Sweet Tooth book. It's awesome. I literally sat down in one evening and read the first 11 issues, and I just could not put the book down. It's awesome. And it continued with issue 12. Check out the first 5 to see why. It's really, really a great book. If you haven't been reading this, I can't recommend it enough. And Jeff Lemire is definitely a person to watch. But that's InStockTrades.com, Sweet Tooth. I want everyone to support the Hero Initiative. That's heroinitiative.org. That's just a wonderful, wonderful service for comic creators of the past who need our help today. And I really consider supporting the Hero Initiative. That's heroinitiative.org. I always tell people, at least consider the price of a comic book. And that's not that much. Just consider, dropping that in periodically and just supporting this wonderful service. This is a hobby that we all enjoy on a regular basis. And, this is a great chance to help the people out that have laid the foundation for the wonderful comics that we're reading today. I adore this hobby. It's one of the reasons why we do this show, and just really consider supporting the Hero Initiative. Don't forget our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. I actually just renewed the phone number for another year. So definitely check out our voicemail line and get your thoughts on the show. Whether you agree or disagree with us or things like that, half the fun of this show is the interaction and discussion. I absolutely love the thoughts that are thrown out there. The voicemails today were a great example of that. Thought-provoking voicemails, and I really, really appreciate those thoughts. If you want to shout out a book, if you want to shout out a thought on something, comic topic, something you want discussed on the show, please consider sending those in. It's one of my joys when I'm putting together the episode. A lot of times Jim and I only have a limited amount of time to record during the course of the week, and it's fun to kind of revisit your voicemails and get your thoughts onto the show. It's kind of my joy on these editing days for me to be able to pull some of those out and chat with you. We have a few episodes that we're currently working on for our next episode. I'm not sure which one's going to be airing next, to be perfectly honest with you. We're going to be doing something that we're going to periodically do. I want to do them at least quarterly, and a writer spotlight, where we spotlight a certain creator, and I'd like to do it eventually with artists as well and just kind of circulate around. But our first one's going to be on Gail Simone. It's a writer that Jim and I, it's near and dear to our heart. One of the episodes we're going to be doing is going to spotlight the most recent issue of Birds of Prey, Secret Six, and Welcome to Tranquility, issue number 2. We planned on getting to issue number 1, and that just didn't work out in our schedule, so we are definitely going to be discussing issue number 2 on that. We're going to be recording that sometime this week. We're also recording this week an in-depth look at the recently released Batman Under the Red Hood animated film. We're also going to discuss the Jonah Hex short that went with it. We're going to be joined from some special guests. They're going to be discussing that with us, some friends of the show. That we're going to be recording this week as well. We have a special episode on Hero tomorrow, which is going to be airing. So a number of shows are going to be released over the next couple weeks that we're airing. We're also, Jim and I are preparing to record Batman the Cult. So all of these things are going to be coming up this month. So just some great episodes coming your way. But that's kind of the episode lineup. I'm not sure what order they're going to be released in. It all depends on editing, when we get them recorded, and what those segments look like. We'll decide what pieces go together and what episodes are going to be coming out first. So just keep an eye on the show website, and that'll let you know what episode's coming next. And like I said, this week that'll also be, for this next month actually, that'll be your source to take a look at as far as what the release schedule is going to be as I head back into work to start getting my classroom together and preparing lessons for my students. So very cool.
Bye!
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see, Hawkman, your plan, and what you do to me, Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian, working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up.